Seconds to grab your breakfast and tea and coffee and make your way, find a spot. We're going to get started. If you have that, oh no, it's okay.
Oh, I just wrote some notes down for myself. Do you want to do the office stuff first?
Because I was hoping if people arrive late, then we can do the tour. Is that? Oh yeah, we're gonna do the office rules and that kind of, wait.
Do you want me to do like the welcome and have everyone go around in a circle first? Or?
Yes. Okay. Is that okay?
Yep.
Also, we have mics like on. If you'd like to use the mic. If we don't want to strain.
Is this on?
Yep. That's on too. So I can just move.
I'm trying to wave with one finger. It wasn't working.
Sorry. I'm just gonna do that.
And where is this? I just got added to the list.
Thank you. I thank you for knowing me well.
Yeah, I was like, because if I ping her right now, she's gonna freak out.
Not freak out. I'm just not
Well,
gonna
there's
be
like
able to
it's more stressful than it like. There's no difference.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's it going? It's all right.
Yeah, some people want to bring their they have
You're good?
it's very small. The rest of the US. Thank you.
I'm not music, so why is that?
Yeah, that would be interesting. Compare the You're in California.
This copy process is taking a long time.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I was just gonna We just recently, my husband got me a game that we played a lot as a family when I was a kid for Christmas. So we were friends with kids that are actually It's a French card game.
I've never heard of it, but that's not surprising. I figured once everybody was like, oh, I spent my New Year doing board games, I was like, okay, I'm gonna jump on that. I know what to do for activity planning. If they're like, oh, can you do activities? That's cool. Buy a board game, call it a day. Yeah, we need to start.
All right, folks, we're going to get started. If everyone could come, yeah, find a seat. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. Once you've got your coffee, come on over. To kick things off this morning, I thought we'd just do a quick go around to remind ourselves who each other are and just to create a little bit more of a familiar environment. So, Janice Wade, I'm a program officer at the Mozilla Foundation. And to do this, I thought it would be fun if we all shared our favorite childhood game, board game or other game that you loved playing as a child. So mine is Mealborn. We actually started playing this as a family recently. My husband got it for me for Christmas. It was one of our family's favorite games growing up.
Hello, I'm Amy, and I think my favorite game growing up was Guess Who. Really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, we can also throw this back.
Introduce yourself and your favorite game, board game, other game.
Favorite board game, other game, any game?
Any game, video game.
Hi,
Video game?
I'm Melissa.
Hello, Melissa.
Hello. On the spot. What is my favorite game? I don't know. These days I'm into the Nintendo Switch, playing
Yeah.
the Mario Maze one. I forgot what it's called. That's what I'm into.
I'm Michelle, a program officer, and my favorite game was Foursquare. I loved playing that game.
Hi, I'm Julie. I guess my favorite game is Gin Rummy or card games like that.
Hello, hello.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Richard and Parcheesi.
Hi, I'm Finn, Nation of Empire.
Hi, I'm André. I'm a fellow, and I think my favorite game was, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Don't know the name in English actually. Yeah.
That's okay. You can say it in Spanish.
Oh?
Go ahead and say it in Spanish.
Can I say it in Portuguese though?
Yeah, Portuguese. Excuse me. Excuse me. Yes.
Sorry. I don't know the name in Portuguese as well. Forget. I mean,
No games. Andre played no games.
Hey, I'm Danaya, and I'm divided between Scrabble and Mario Kart. Hi, my name is Valentina, and when I was little, I used to play with this elastic rubber band that you could jump, like do tricks like that. Yeah, that was my favorite.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I think my favorite game was tag. That's it.
Hi, I'm Khadija. I'm a fellow. My favorite childhood game was Trivial Pursuit. Do you guys remember that game?
Hi, I'm Stefania, and my favorite game was exactly the same as Valentina's, so that must be like a cultural, regional thing.
Hi, I'm Daniela, and I think our family favorite game was Pictionary, so.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Aidan, a tech policy fellow, and as a child I always had an affinity for Monopoly.
I am Rizwan, I'm the Director of Leadership Programs. I was young, we played, the first board game that we played a lot was Life, and before that, a lot of Lego.
My name is Jen Beard. I'm a program officer with Mozilla, and I liked playing categories.
I'm Slammer. We didn't really play games as when I was a kid, so I don't have a particular game, but I like to swing a lot.
Nice.
Sure. My name's Justin. I work on executive communications with Mitchell and Monopoly.
Nice.
Hi, I'm Clara, Mozilla fellow. With family, I love Monopoly, but with my my deep fake, my twin sister, my favorite game was I used to build race cars, like toy race cars, and would try to figure out how to make them the most aerodynamic and race them through buildings. So.
I'm Sierra, I'm a fellow, and my favorite game was Sonic the Hedgehog.
I'm Darius, a fellow, and I'd say adventure on the Atari 2600.
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm a fellow. Sorry. I'm a fellow. Me and my sister used to play a game where we tried to drink all the bathwater empty. And so we used to play that game a lot, but we never did it.
My daughter would love that game. All right. Well, that was fun. So, believe it or not, we're at the sort of halfway point of the fellowship calendar. So, I first want to say congratulations to everyone in the room. You all have been doing such amazing, amazing work. I don't want to call out any names, but you guys have all been making impacts in different ways, writing op-eds, letters to the editor, research papers, position pieces. You've been building really cool stuff. You've been digging deep to figure out how to launch organizations to continue to stay in your work. You've been launching or relaunching websites. You've been fighting nerves to go and speak to groups large and small about all of the amazing work that you're doing. So really, really amazing stuff. And I think something else that's been happening is that you've been finding your footing in this network of peers, colleagues, and friends that are supporting your work now and will continue to support your work beyond your fellowship. And I think that's probably the most exciting thing that has happened in the past couple of months. So this week is about digging deep. It's about reflection. It's about planning. It's about collaboration. And it's about celebrating. So we're going to be doing a lot of work together in small groups and individually over the course of the week to really figure out how to put your roots down even deeper, grow your branches wider, and continue to build the work that you're doing so that it can continue in some way beyond the time of your fellowship. So before we actually dive into a lot of the deep work, we have some logistical information to do.
Real quick things. So first of all, welcome to the San Francisco office. You will soon discover it's a little bit of a labyrinth, which is why we're going to do a quick office tour this morning. Before we go into further details, just so you know, little housekeeping items. I'm thrilled, as you can see, we have a lovely kitchen. We actually have like 4 in this building. Please, whenever you're finished with your coffee cups, dishes from lunch, things like that, do put them into the dishwasher that you will see there. Or wash them. Please try to just pick up after yourself and you know, if you're moving tables or things around in other spaces and try to just put things back where they came from, pick up yourself, you know, the stuff we've all been doing since we're kids. Lastly, if you have any questions about the office, if you're curious about amenities, please check out the San Francisco office guide that is in our kind of winter summit guide doc that I put together that has everything you could possibly know from, like, you know, if you needed specific rooms. I think gyms were the only thing we didn't have on that list about this office. But fortunately, that has been amended. So let's look really quickly at the week. Janice was very kind to kind of put this visual together so you can get a sense. Today, after the tour, we're going to do some scenario planning. Then there will be a fireside chat with Alan Davidson here in the Commons area. that he's going to discuss about his experience as a Mozilla Fellow and having close ties to Mozilla as he currently works for the corporation. And then we're having a fundraising workshop in the Commons area with Jesse Keating, Juan, and Jesse Ward, as well as like a gallery walkthrough or run by Michelle. Is there a better word you would like to call? Gallery walkthrough with Michelle. It's going to be a fun, collaborative, interactive event. And then a quick closing circle, and then you have an open evening. Once again, as you saw with the expense policy I sent out, tonight is a free night. You have $60 for this evening, and that will cover, you know, your lift to the restaurant, your meal, all of that. You do not need to submit receipts for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Just automatically just account $60 a day, and that's it. So just so you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you get $60, and that's what you'll be reimbursed. Perfect. So once again, our further detailed. And resources, your Bible for the week, the thing you can bookmark and trust is the Fellows Winter Summit Splash That page. That has links to everything. I'm updating that if anything changes. Secondly, if you have in the moment communications, Slack channel, anything, I'm so thrilled by how many folks are already using it for like, oh, or who wants to walk to the office or stuff like that. That's perfect. That's the use for it. Great. Now we will go on a quick office tour unless we have questions or comments.
I think this lot is the
Fellows Winter Summit.
Yeah, everybody knows.
It's all good. We're all good. No worries.
I have two quick announcements, and then I'll be the one taking you guys on a tour. Can you go back to the thing for the week? Good morning, everyone. So two quick things that I wanted to lift up and have a request for some of you. So tomorrow from 10:30 to 12, there's a session with senior Mozillians across MoCo and MoFo. And what we're doing, for those of you who have not RSVP'd yet, if you are planning on coming, please RSVP by noon today. Because the reason I'm asking this, and I think I sent a note out just to clarify, I think it's going to be a really exciting opportunity. We're proactively putting together matches and a few rounds of matches over the course of that hour and a half between each of you and senior Mozillians who we know have some sort of overlap with your work. And so if we don't know that you're coming, you're not going to be matched with anybody. So and just RSVPing on the calendar invite, that's all I'm asking. So if you want to come, do that. And then the other thing too is the Wikimedia Foundation, we need to submit to them a list for who's going to be there just for their security. So if you were planning on coming, that's going to be a cool event. Please RSVP that if you're coming by end of day today.
Is RSVP just saying yes to
Yeah, just the calendar invite.
And you reminded me of one last thing. Can you raise your hand if you do not have a Mozilla Office badge? Anyone does not have an Office badge? Okay. Just one. Okay, so everybody's brought their fancy Office badge, because you will need this for the week to get throughout the space. Perfect. Thank you so much. Great. Now Amy will lead us on a real fun tour.
If you're to come, stand up, come with me. I'll take you on a brief tour. For everyone, even if you're not coming on the tour, the most important things that you'll need to know are right here. Those are the bathrooms, the closest bathrooms. There's 2 all-gender restrooms. Yeah, just leave right here. Tour will be leaving in 30 seconds. Where did you
I don't think anyone's going to ask for it. Because when it works out, we'll go for it. Here's an attribute.
Okay, well, I'll start here. So this is where we're going to be. Okay, I'm starting. If you're coming, you be here, and if not, you're going to have to be here. So this is where we're going to be most of the week. This is called the Commons. The other big space, we're going to be back and forth between these spaces most of the week. That's the community space. And so, no, that's called the community space. This is definitely you'll also see, most people don't go in there, but you will see other people, like this is where often some staff that works here that have lunch, et cetera, so you'll see people. Lunch is served here every day, and usually between 11:30 and 1, and so, like, it's just, buffet style. And then kitchen. And then the front desk, people over at the front desk are wonderful if you need things to ask about. Yeah, they're stairs. All right.
You to come take seats up front, please.
I love the grassy feel here.
Thanks for starting to take seats, guys. We're going to start moving into scenario planning.
Do we want to say this is a device-free activity?
Sorry?
Do you want to say it's a device-free activity?
Device free?
Yeah.
Perhaps.
What do you think?
Device light.
So we're going to ask you to be a little bit uncomfortable and go against your natural inclination and ask that this be a rather device light, even a device free activity if possible. Of course, if you need it for reference purposes, we can make accommodations. But it's just a couple of hours and we really want some big mind exploration. Great, welcome. Good morning. Who's done a scenario planning before? Do I need the mic, by the way? This is awkward. The mic would be helpful. Okay. Who's done scenario planning before? Anybody heard of it? Steve? Brett, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've heard about it? You can say no.
Like thinking out, if this happens, what will we do?
Okay. Yeah, that's one way to look at it for sure. Is that your thought too?
Yeah, it's more like trying to imagine futures, good ones, bad ones, and then explore the consequences of those futures.
Yep. So that's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to take a couple of hours and build 4 worlds. Who likes world building, like the sci-fi style world building? Yes. Okay. So we're going to do that together, little by little, based on 2 axes like this. And the purpose of this really is to articulate 4 different worlds, imagine where they're going to be in 10 years if we take those axes all the way to the edge, and then walk together, like build the steps towards that, and then imagine where we are as those worlds evolve, right? So it is an imagination activity. There's plenty of coffee and cold brew and tea and water if you need that to keep your mind hydrated and going. And we're looking at and trying to build a deeper understanding of what are the trade-offs as we build this healthier internet, right? What are we giving up, maybe, in order to get to what we want on one side? So you can imagine that some of these worlds are going to be really great. This is exactly what we want to do, right? They're not necessarily utopic, but they're going to be good-looking, healthy-looking worlds, and some of them are going to not look so healthy. And in those situations, we have to ask ourselves, are we pushing a good or stopping a bad, right? So what's your role within that world? I want to kind of remind us of our community participation guidelines. This is a conversational space. You're going to be in small groups. You're going to be together in this big group. We're not recording this. I don't think we're streaming it. Unclear. I think I can just disconnect. Yeah, there we are. Not streaming it. And it's really meant to be an opportunity to be imaginative, but also rooted in reality on some level, and to grow from conversation. So it's going to feel slow. This isn't a super active workshop. It's about thinking and speaking together and sharing ideas. So with that, would you like to walk us through our first, wait, where am I going over here?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Richard again. Good morning. Parcheesi is still my favorite game of all time. So yeah, I'm going to help a little bit in terms of laying out some of the original conceptual underpinnings for what we're trying to accomplish today. And I think one good example I'm going to throw on the table is the notion of when you do scenario planning, you're trying to find sort of extremes, at least in your mind. What are things that sort of are entities or qualities that are at the ends of these two axes you're trying to build? So one example I'll use is open versus closed. So one can imagine a situation where over time, let's say in the next 10 years, we have a web that is open versus a web that is closed. But if you think about it for a bit, those are, in some sense, that's sort of, those are two extremes, but it's part of a continuum. So there was actually no such thing as a completely open web, right? That means there's no rules of the road, there's no common standards, there's no elements of concentration of anything, and essentially a completely open world dissipates into chaos and nothingness. So that's not necessarily a realistic scenario. On the other hand, a completely closed world means it's completely locked down tight. There's no ability for anybody to do anything, no expression, and that is a world that asphyxiates basically and turns into basically a cold death. So while we think of open versus closed as polarities in this context, they're really part of a continuum. So what we're trying to do is work with you all over the next few minutes and think about what are some of the elements of these axes, and you look at the web for the next 10 years, what are things we see of these polarities? But again, they're not sort of the extremes. It's more about a continuum, and it's also about trade-offs, right? We like an open web. We also like certain elements of enclosure that give people security. We like the notion of privacy. We also like the notion that people of security as well. So we're just going to start talking with you all and asking you to give us some thoughts about how you see some of these axes developing. What are the key qualities or concepts around the web in 10 years' time that we think make up some of these trade-offs that would be worth exploring over the next hour or two? So let's just sort of open the floor, right?
High trust, low trust.
High trust and low trust. Maybe talk about that. So whose trust are we talking about? Is this end user trust, basically?
Trust in institutions.
Institution trust, okay, good. My understanding is institutional trust is an all-time high right now, so you're talking about, somehow a future where there's less trust in institutions, okay? What else? Other thoughts on sort of these dichotomies we're thinking about that play out into different scenarios? Yes?
Racist and anti-racist.
Is there a level of, is it inclusive, exclusive? Is that another way to look at it, or is this a very, a nuanced view of inclusion and exclusion?
Yeah, I think it's a specific kind of. I'd say inclusion and exclusion, like participation or content development.
I would say top-down versus bottom-up regulation.
Could you talk a bit more about
The rules are being developed bottom-up versus the rules are being defined and pushed from the top.
Does nobody put that the regulation is basically power, so power or control is coming top down versus bottom up? What we're trying to do initially is figure out, try to keep the political and maybe technology environment out of it. It's more about general societal concepts. So is it more about power from the top, or I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to.
It's about rules, right? So it doesn't have to be.
Who develops
just,
the rules of the road? Okay, yeah.
Norms as
Yeah.
well.
Yep. Good.
Yeah, hands over here.
I was going to say colonialism, decolonialism, but I think it's
No, I think it's good to.
D-O, sorry.
Decolonizing, yeah.
Darius, you have one?
Yeah, decentralized and centralized.
So that also refers to power or any of the above, right?
Communication, power, whatever. Yeah.
Going back to decolonizing, just curious, is that like taking active steps of pulling away from colonization that has happened in the past? So it's really sort of
Yeah, and kind of embracing indigenous ways of doing things, localized, diverse ways of doing things, so not kind of having one universal internet where we all kind of use the same language and basically things developed in local areas rather than
It's very similar to what Stefania mentioned, but multi-stakeholder versus multilateral, how should decisions be made? So open would be multi-stakeholder, and closed would be multilateral. Okay.
Sorry.
So that's a perfectly good question. So the difference between them is that when I think of multi-stakeholder, it means that we can have stakeholders who may be civil society, who could be government, who could be private sector, who could be academia. Whereas multilateral is that decisions should only be made by state actors. So it is the responsibility of the state to make a decision versus a more inclusive approach that includes, say, civil society.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if there is a microphone or
Yeah, sorry, it's a good question. So I was saying that how I see the difference between the two concepts is that multi-stakeholder is more inclusive because it allows different stakeholder groups, be they civil society, be they the private sector, be they governments, to be involved in making decisions that impact our lives, whereas multilateral is a more conventional or classical worldview that decisions that greatly impact us should only be made by nation states.
I just to push that for a second, is it multi-stakeholder is the opposite potentially unilateral? So one extreme is a whole bunch of people are involved in making decisions, a lot of stakeholders, versus maybe it's just one entity, whatever you want to call it, a nation state, a international, very concentrated.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Yeah, Steve? Sorry.
one of the bigger factors for me, and I'm sure there's a better way of expressing it, but high Gini coefficient, low Gini coefficient. So a world where wealth is highly concentrated and a world where wealth is more evenly distributed.
I want to get to the point of creativity, but the best thing I can come up with is like fun and boring.
We won't ask you where this exercise falls along that continuum.
There's a real
we'll
question
assume
around
it's.
opportunity for innovation.
Yeah.
And then, like,
Yeah, I'm not sure how
Yeah.
to say it except like monoclonal verse.
And some have called it play, right? The notion that play, in a broad sense. Yeah.
I'll give it to you after. I would say on the close side, resource extraction, or thinking of resources, thinking of the world in terms of resources, and kinship on the open side.
Is that okay? I rephrased it. People-driven and resource-driven, kind of the way you look at the world.
No, because so like thinking about water, for example, right? That not thinking about water as a resource, but actually thinking of like a kinship relationship with water, so that our natural resources, or our natural things in the world, we don't think of them as resources, but we think of them as things on the earth that we're in relationship with. So like less exploitative. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
relationship
So that could also be
versus.
exploitation or resource exploitation. Yeah.
a relationship versus exploitation. Yeah, sorry.
I was going to say scarce versus abundant. So thinking about, if we think right now about connectivity, it's very abundant, at least here in San Francisco, and that changes some dynamics. So, thinking about that as a dichotomy can be helpful for introductions of other technology, like deepfakes is probably a scarce technology right now. It's not widely distributed, only certain people could do it. How would it change if anybody could manipulate the truth really, really easily with out-of-the-box software?
I see a connection actually with the previous category, right? So if you see something as a resource, automatically it's something that's scarce and needs to be sort of controlled. If it's an abundance, relationships are much more abundant. And anyway, so I think,
we can decide what to call this, but I was thinking of like truth versus misinformation, or like science versus anti-science, and like facts versus fake stuff. Yeah.
Says the science person. Yeah.
Not that science is necessarily true, but. Right.
Can I just push that? So is it more about like a body of fact, or is it about like process, like discerning truth in a situation, or like there's a scientific method, for example, right? I mean, there's ways of trying to go about finding truth.
Yeah, I'd say
whatever you call it.
I'd say yes to both. Yeah. So it's like it's like trust in the process of trying to have fact-based decision making versus not.
Yeah.
And I think there's also some intention there, right? Because with disinformation, it's the intentionally pushing known untruths, I guess, and on the other side, it's like a different intention. Right. Yeah.
In
Claire?
like Valentine's Day, I want to say love and hate for open and close.
Love and hate.
For like a worldview?
Yeah. Like you can think about people who are, Buddhist monks promoting love, and then you have violent extremists promoting hate.
So here's a question for you, Claire. Are those actually opposites? Is the opposite of love apathy versus, I mean, just putting it out there.
Yeah, I think it's philosophical. Good question. I don't know.
Read only versus read write, so not just in terms of kind of the content or communication, but also the tools and the networks and systems.
Yeah, that's good. Read only and read write. That's good.
Slammer, is that your hand?
Oh yeah, here, Slammer.
Is this really? This is a microphone. Okay. I don't know what the word for that I would use this for open, but for closed, I would say productivity, because I just think being in an open world means that you don't have to do anything, and not be penalized. And so, I don't know what the opposite would be, because everything just seems negative, like inactivity, which I don't think that's a negative thing, but.
Oh, I see.
Freedom?
Leisure.
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 So.
Interesting.
We got a nice list here.
Yeah, maybe a couple more. Go ahead.
So I just can't think of the right words, but maybe you guys can help. So one is like challenging the assumptions, and the other one is just taking everything like it's unquestioning and questioning. I don't know what are the two opposites.
Dogma versus skeptical.
No, it's more of like dogmatic versus like open to knowing that maybe what you're doing is wrong. I just don't know. Critical and uncritical. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'm thinking about open and closed in terms of like communication on small scale, like between people. So talking about your emotions would be open, and closed would be not talking about your emotions ever and just keeping it inside all the time. So I guess like vulnerability and not vulnerability.
What is the opposite?
Instagram? I don't know. I'm not sure.
That's a type of energy.
Right.
But it's like the inability to be vulnerable.
Yes.
So it's not just that you're not, it's that you can't be.
Right.
I don't know.
Incapable of vulnerability or yeah.
Another one I would add is that's important to me is fragile versus resilient, or if you subscribe to a certain obstreperous author, anti-fragile.
Talb is a fascinating guy.
That's why these aren't positive, negative.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't forget that open and closed is one of.
These are not the headings. Right, exactly. These are just examples. Yeah.
Censored and free. Also, I have some issues with privacy versus security. I think it's more granular and more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
They're not opposites, in my view. Surveilled and not surveilled.
So I have one. I'm not really sure the opposite of it, but like commercial driven, feeling that you are merchandise all the time while online, and I'm not sure what it would be the opposite of it.
So from the user perspective, like how they feel when they're online?
Yeah, like closed, it's a only commercially driven network, and that makes you feel like a merchandise all the time, and the opposite would be, I don't know, like creativity driven or expression, yeah.
One suggestion has been sort of the user as object versus user as subject. So you're the object of advertising versus the subject of an actual relationship. I mean, that's one. I've heard that. I don't know if that's related to what you're saying.
What do we want to say the other side of that? Do you want to do subject and object?
Yeah, I mean, people think that's useful.
I think like knowledge driven versus commercial driven, probably, yeah.
Maybe public interest instead of commercial. As a
Woman in the box.
I want to say like pain and less pain, or harm and less harm. So like harm would be on closed and pain would be on closed. And I'm talking about like what people can see and have, and like what other people are forced to see and hear.
Is less?
So, yeah.
Or the absence of?
Oh, absence of, if we're looking at ideals. Yeah.
Absence of harm. And then absence of pain. Yeah.
Do we have enough to?
No, we don't have nearly enough. I think we need. Yeah. So now this is great. Thank you all. So the next step then is trying to figure out, are there, from all of these, great contributions, are there sort of two sets of these that we think have particular resonance for us as we apply it to looking down the road 10 years to where we see the web and the kind of scenarios we want to try to build. So
we're trying to build like this map, right? Where it's two different poles pulling, but a part of one whole societal structure is the idea. So,
yeah.
And I think the broader they are, the broader the poles you choose, the more you can put into them, right? So rather than starting on the super specific ones, if we start on the broad ones, and then I would encourage you to bring the specificity into the conversation.
Can we find commonalities that link up a lot of these specifics that you guys have teased out?
The left and the right, okay, but the upper and the down, what does it stand for?
It's it's just the other axes. So there's no negative, positive per se, it's just the ranges at which, like how we're viewing society. So one way to look at society is built along.
But is it open and closed one, and then what's the?
That's what we're choosing.
You can, but it doesn't have to be open and closed, it doesn't have to be asking. But so the way, like, one of the scenario planning workshops I was a part of, we did centralized and decentralized were one axes, and then the other axes were was it stable and fragmented.
Right, right.
Right, so we're looking at society as a stable society or truth where truth exists or unstable, right? So those are the ones that I worked on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to throw one out there and we can all figure it out together. Fun and boring?
I was going to suggest, but I didn't raise this before, so sorry. Local versus global, because I think this could work really well on the vertical axes for
Local versus
global.
on the vertical.
Correct.
Which is kind of like centralized versus decentralized.
Perhaps,
I mean, either one would work for me.
How do people feel about that? I mean, I know this is a weird, like, I disagree, like, disagree. Local versus global, or centralized versus decentralized,
Concentrated.
versus dispersed, distributed,
Yeah.
What words?
Centralized are pretty, I mean, they're useful and things that resonate with the language we already use. So,
Yeah, I agree with
Centralized and decentralized? Does anybody have, yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question about the process. So is the idea that we will pick 4 terms and sort of see, and then, as you said, kind of fill in. So when we have the axes, then we'll talk about sort of what things look like in the quadrants, and then are we going to experiment with another set, like, or is this the?
Oh, this is the one that we're doing today, because we only have.
Okay, so
the
once we
morning,
pick
but,
one set of like that's the only ones we're gonna work with for today.
For today.
Okay.
But what was in the quadrants? Is it like a news story or
Yeah.
development?
It's
So-
a combination of those two things.
Yeah.
You have
No, I get that. So what's,
Yeah,
how, if it was open and closed and fun and boring, and you say like, Facebook unleashes a robotic mind, you'd be like, that's fun, but it's super scary, right? So.
Yes,
is it
exactly.
news stories?
That's what we're
Is
gonna
it
do. So,
Technologies, what is?
Yeah,
what is
headlines.
so
Yeah.
what we're gonna,
Okay.
we're layering on the technology thing, and then the first thing we're gonna do as a group is figure out what does it actually look like 10 years? Like, there's another layer on this, which is time, right? So it's not only this, if you can open up the 3D point, we're here today, if this is 10 years out when we are at the extreme ends of all of the quadrants, what does that world look like at that moment? We'll do that as a group, and then break into groups and come up with the step-by-step headlines of basically how you got there. And then, so that's where you can figure out, oh, we need to stop this from happening. Like, we need to stop it in year 3 in order to not get there in year 10.
Yeah, there's actually a concept called backcasting, which is related to this, which is the notion of if you look 10 years in the future, in this case, to what the headline is, then you work backwards from there to figure out what are the steps that got you to that point, and then where are the interventions you can imagine to help probably prevent that scenario from taking place.
And then from a process perspective, we're just gonna willy-nilly figure out the 4 groups, and you're gonna build a world as that group first. And then later, you're gonna decide which world you think your work or you want to stand in, whether it's because you're stopping something from happening or because you're pushing something forward. So that's the point at which hopefully it'll become a little bit more personal and identifiable, but we're gonna ask that you build a world even if it's not your world. Is that okay? Yes.
I was just thinking about one of the axes
Okay.
as maybe likely, unlikely, as if but maybe that's too temporal. So like fun, boring, likely, unlikely.
Is it likely that the world will be fun? Is that kind of?
No, but if like you look at like Brett's and our, like I forgot the robot mimes, then if it's unlikely but that could be fun, then it would be like
But then
we can
you're,
map it out.
but then you're saying that since the goal is like to try to push something, like if it's unlikely, then it's good, but it's unlikely then you don't work on it. It just gives up hope a little bit.
Or maybe you have to put all of your energy into that thing.
In some sense, that's already built into the notion of like moving along the axes. Like it becomes more likely if you put some effort into making it happen, for example.
leave the fun, boring
Uh-huh.
spectrum, because the initial thing I thought was, where does terrifying go on that spectrum? And then I realized it can't really fit on there, and so that means that a lot of the topics that we would ordinarily discuss wouldn't be on that spectrum, which I initially thought would be kind of bad. But then maybe that it's just for this one workshop we don't talk about the terrifying things, you know? Like,
Well, I mean, we can, but it's like, if we do centralized and decentralized, and we do centralized and terrifying,
I know there's plenty of terrifying and centralized and
Right.
decentralized, don't worry.
but, so I guess the thing is that the adjectives terrifying and fun, if we're gonna like expand the fun and boring, is that it doesn't really paint a world view.
Yeah. I vote for the colonizing
As
the other axis.
As this way. So
Whatever, one of the two axes versus
people, so
decentralized.
people wanna do decentralized and
No, I don't know, I'm
centralized.
voting for the other axis.
Okay.
Decentralized and centralized, I think that we all seem to agree that that's one axis. But I don't know.
How are decolonization and, I mean, they're different, I understand. In terms of,
But I think they're correlated a little bit, right? Like, because, like, the more centralized it is, the more.
They are correlated.
it has,
But a lot of
like,
these things
yeah.
are correlated.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
But
challenge. How do
what
you
I like challenging the thinking of like whose knowledge is perpetuated and who is producing knowledge and what knowledge are we highlighting or who is highlighting knowledge. So like yeah, they're correlated. But I thought we were voting for the other actions that I just spoke up. So we don't have to do that.
so that's an option.
That's an option.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have things that are orthogonal to each other in order to paint an interesting picture. I mean, for me, centralization and decentralization and colonization and decolonization are not the same thing, but they are in the same, roughly in the same domain. So instead of an axis like this, we're getting a bit of axis like that.
Yeah.
What about the leisure and productivity?
I like that one.
Because it could be very between each of the axes, I think.
And it brings ideas like this.
Right. And entertainment.
Is it like,
So-
is the productivity meant to be like useful, so it's assuming that anything that you do in the network is so like monetized in some way and somebody's asking you to act on behalf of something that generates value for somebody?
Right.
So maybe it's more like commerce driven versus
Versus, yeah.
self value
Human driven or like
or the idea of like what you were saying, kinship driven, more about the relationship
Yeah,
than it's
yeah.
about the money. I mean, I know that's not the dichotomy set up.
Collectivism versus individualism.
So we have collectivism versus individualism. Would that be orthogonal to decentralized versus centralized?
Also, once again,
Yeah.
in the same sort of domain.
capitalist and human.
Yeah.
the world as resource
We
versus
could
world as
just do it like
relationship.
this, just put these, like, use the symbols and then where's you figure out.
You can sort of read it.
Redefine that quadrant if you want.
Yeah.
Money and people
Money and
versus
people.
the concentration for centralized, right? And the distributedness of it being decentralized. Do we have anybody who vehemently disagrees with these quadrants? Great. So let's use that for the purpose of these exercises. So we'll clean up and build it out. Do you want to talk through what these points look like?
Sure. So
And I'll clean up that side.
yeah, so decentralized, decentralized, and then sort of people versus money, how we want to figure it out. So just
We don't want to see.
throwing some quick examples on here. You can see a world that's highly centralized, for example. There's a monarch king, but he's or queen. They're a very wonderful person, and they're very people focused. So they use their power to create a society that is super focused on human beings. That's one sort of scenario potentially. You could also see a world where, of course, that entity or person focuses just on the commercial gains. I think that many would say that's sort of the dystopia, the worst of all possible. So that's an example of what we're trying to do here is just flesh out what each of these quadrants mean in terms of taking these two pieces and then creating a 10-year timeline this point, you can start thinking about what society look like, what technologies are overlaid on top of this in terms of where we see the evolution, for example, of things like AI, Internet of Things, and then look at each of these four quadrants to develop headlines and thinking, yeah.
Can I just add for the people side that I'd like to think of it as not just relationships between people, but between people and animals, between people again and like water, and so it's not just people to people relationships.
So maybe, so going back to sort of what I was saying, maybe this is about relationship itself.
Relationships, yeah.
Relationship between people, with the planet, with
Right,
the things
yeah.
on the planet. And this is more about seeing everything and maybe everyone as a resource. So you're not really a person, you're just somebody I'm getting money out of, I'm extracting value for my benefit. So maybe that's another way to think. I mean, I think these are useful shorthands, but that certainly could be a way we can, as you guys are thinking through the scenarios, that's sort of a subtext. Maybe go underneath that. Where else? Oh, there she is. So what was the next step? Was then breaking into the groups? Is that
Yeah, so we have to count off by 4.
count off by 4? Yes, and I know as Mozilla fellows, you people have probably background and expertise, so I think we can all, starting with Clara, count by 4.
Sorry, what is that?
1.
Just say 1.
4, 1,
2, 3.
2.
3.
4.
1.
2.
3.
Excellent. Did everybody?
1, 2.
Yes. Question.
No.
You're 4. Okay.
Okay, so Danielle is 4.
So
Daniela was missing.
in
4 was the next one.
in a reasonably decentralized manner, if you guys can
Can we
put yourselves together, the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. So get into your numeric groups.
4.
Is this the right way to do it?
Later, yeah. Not right now, it's right away.
The number 3 is
the 10 years and how these technologies play a role in your particular quadrant. We'll do some other stuff in a minute, but that's the first element of this. Current technologies, but moving ahead, where do you think like AI is going in 10 years? How does that play into your scenario? So think about it from a technology standpoint.
Right, so remind me, what is it supposed to actually put?
So think of that as extreme in terms of the most centralized, technology and centralized protocol. Starting there, you see technology where everything is stored on your computer and it's technology. For now, it's just technology.
Okay, yeah, so like, so
I mean, it's the tracking.
yeah.
So it runs on laptop, so yesterday we just started like a Wi-Fi router that doesn't necessarily need to be connected to it. This is on the Wi-Fi router, pass messages to one another. So you can
I'll just look up the
pass messages from one place to another. So it's a protocol and there's various different apps that can access the protocol. So I'll show yeah, it's just downloading the
Just what's that? How does it?
Yeah.
How do you, like I'm thinking about like the scenario where 1984, like this big eye, it goes from like living thing and like you're well versed in the vocabulary and then rituals, yes. Yay! Awesome. Wait, well, what I think that's in the language.
It's the term for like using your physics to determine your
Well, except that it's also used to actually try to find, the bad connotation.
The bad connotation.
Yeah, I mean, should we formulate it in terms of like scenarios? That would be a good one.
Yeah, sure.
Just the terminology. Actually, like, they want to be able to next control educated on, this particular case.
So we just say big data.
Big data is a very big umbrella. So it's sort of, it's valuing data.
Some like more technical we want based on that idea of like almost talking really about like targeting trading community radio stations that we want to
Data driven. So like quantitative.
buy a house because it respects all these. It's like it's like a generally speaking that employable for some use. I guess I don't know. I'm just thinking because we're just city that's why we're trying. Otherwise, we're just kind of recapitulating but I know what you're saying. So Everywhere else in the world, we have to see. Have money, you get access to all of this. Maybe later on. Don't have money, you're screwed. You just change it. So I mean, this is horrifying. Which is, but at the same time. I mean, I do think social credit should go, or social credit school should go something to your point.
Like for protocols, email theoretically should be fully decentralized protocol because I can use Tutanoja, you can use Proton Mail, and we can send messages to one another. In practice, Gmail is so even if you have a protocol which is decentralized, it doesn't mean that
We've got like what's your
Talking about that eyebrow, it's very attractive. So I don't have any plans. I don't know how like dominant here. Plans are very loose. Do you want to? Yeah, but you might have to wait.
I would recommend that.
Put yourself first. Are you? What time? Did you see my email? Like what time?
Yeah, my flight's at like 1 something.
So you're not gonna do this?
No, I didn't. Yeah, but my flight's at 1:40.
Oh, are you? I thought you were calling.
I was gonna call next week.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna get to the airport and like just sit and lounge things. Yeah. No, I need to take an important. I don't know. Yeah. That was my question. It's gonna come tomorrow morning. All my stuff will probably leave here by. I don't know. I was gonna be here at like 9. Really, like 10:30. Maybe probably like 10:30 at the airport. And then, yeah, to go security. Okay, cool. Alright, I guess I'll head to urgent care. I'll tell my group. Let me know when you're back and I can push to the meeting. So you gotta go to urgent care.
Although then they'll be like, why were you standing next to me?
That's true.
Okay. Nice meeting you.
No, I totally see your point there. So I think against collective. Yeah, same. So, yeah.
I'll tell you about it.
And so there's an interesting, you know, and centralized or decentralized are all very interesting words because it depends on like, okay, centralized is good. Right. Because like, what's going on everybody gets to but everybody gets the same experience. Right. So, right. Because you are inside this project, it makes you happy. It doesn't matter what they're showing you. Information, yeah, right.
I've been using a little bit. Bigger browser and so it's one of the cool things about it is that you can, if you have the link to the site, text protocol, you can go to it and you click a button and you can make it into the box. And so you can make changes to it and do what you want with it. And my friend Jack has been making zines for us and made like a remixable zine library. I can go to the zine library, I can copy it, I can, there's a certain way of I can replace certain zines, which means that I like my Facebook page or that I like my and share them. And what he likes about it is that basically you need to have that link to be able to access it in such a much more peer-to-peer kind of way. Like handing out distributing culture, so it's much more like the traditional zine culture of going through friends of friends, passing on blurting it out on Twitter or something like that to actually people and so that's kind of he also feels really much more comfortable and confident with doing that, increasing followers numbers.
No, it's highly somewhat low on the centralization because there's going to be more of that.
It's more about really like
That's still
some kind of sound in this corner is really like decentralized and that makes it very people process otherwise it feels like Scottish guy made it writing or something it feels like he's kind of
and then this layer of time.
Centralized.
Whoa, are you this tall? So I'm gonna add something. So great to hear so many conversations going on. What I want to add is, in the next 20 minutes, this is what we want to get. We want 15 headlines over the next 10 years. They don't have to be evenly distributed, not evenly, but some level of distribution. That includes one about Zuckerberg, one about a big platform company, for example, Google, Oracle, Amazon, Salesforce, or other, and one about blockchain. So where's blockchain 10 years out in your world? Where is Zuckerberg? And what happened to a big platform in your world?
Yeah, so basically when you bring these into headlines, so you started thinking about use way too much electricity in 10 years. What is a typical you can do headlines that include all
He gets what?
So no, that's not happening.
Yeah.
It's similar to that. It's like just thinking creatively. They can be funny, they can be disturbing.
In this world,
I have no problem.
Remember on onboarding we did sort of the headlines? It's a similar kind of thing.
and all
like the hospital here.
Yeah,
Something. Is the funny, disturbing,
Like that's the hospital here.
it could be the onions, but you know, really organized and stuff. Flesh that world.
Yeah, so headlines
Those quadrants because well, I mean blockchain is just the
I'll just write these up on I'll just write so Facebook will open okay,
global network of
Or like we can say like every continent now, like something like Vision Future.
right, yeah. Every country has it. Every country now has. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right.
That's where someone
Yes,
takes
the DC
decentralized protocol.
We're on like a half a last name basis with it.
their business model.
I said,
we obviously just
the problem is, I don't seem like we're not there in the same shenanigans, but we are narrowing down the so when she asked questions like first time I was thinking I have an answer for her on the little mental restoring the venue.
Okay, so the headline.
It's like the headlines.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I guess like there's one mouse.
He was the one who was asking, can I get details of the venues?
I guess I could say, oh, it's possible. Easter Island. Easter Island.
I was like, you work with her. I'm sorry, I felt the urgency to tell her because I feel like I don't want her to overstep or something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's normally
David, I know David, I know David.
It's something like littering, right? Over time, that really minor interaction there that's now kind of, norming force.
What if it's like shaming or trying to?
Or you can even say, if you want to add reward, say adding my spell
Shaming somebody, sharing.
No, because I mean that's happening now. I trust you and suspected for why he's helping out.
Any media thing where you iris, facial.
Okay, so.
Richard, if you had to weigh in on COVID normally, I've met him before.
Social media.
What would be the format? So I was like, he
We're not sharing.
Yeah, so like, right, so like societal traitor or something discovered on exposed for lack of.
What's talking about like one limit to how
issues he believes are used. You could say, for instance,
There's a share. Yeah. So it's not like, okay.
It's also very much digital preservation.
Shocker. Children denied. Denied Christmas presents. Oh, sorry, Christmas presents.
Dyer, you're pretty great. I guess you have the apple to the right, right?
Is there a negative one? Or one that like, would be a great thing to happen in your world?
It's all pretty good up there.
It's all pretty. Well, so when you're dealing with people, right? Not everybody's a good person. So if they have just as much power as like not as great people, what happens?
I don't know if decentralized them. I don't know if I'm seeing that come to play in this world.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily thinking that there's going to be people having equal access to like certain platforms. I don't know. So it'd be interesting to hear.
I think maybe kind of the bad actors problem is if there are bad people in the world, sure, but I wouldn't say like the majority of people in the world are bad. And at the moment we have these centralized pools of money and power and things, and so a bad actor is able to do a lot more damage.
Yeah, but it's also the easy one. Yeah.
I'm thinking about
Yeah.
isolating resources away from like I'm thinking about
There's no longer water infrastructure. Everything you watch ads to get water in your house. You buy sewer in order to
In Europe have to start mining their e-trash to get conclusions.
government saving due to privatizing infrastructure.
Because at the moment it's basically like it's all shipped to West Africa or Australia there.
Yeah, exactly.
What level of chaos exists in this world, if any? Like, I'm just throwing these questions out there, by the way. I'm not driving you towards anything. But yeah, in a decentralized. People have different, or if it's values driven, people call values driven, called where people have different values and things are different. What level of chaos exists?
Anyways.
From a technological
Yeah, thanks to ad-based utilities.
Yeah.
and chaos.
None of this is
Somebody who's
no, we're the capitalist world, therefore
Okay, so newspaper headlines, so Blackwater Heroes bust. What was the phrase? Bust, record erasure cartel or ring or something, right? Like,
could be abused, sure.
I'm trying to think of like privatized military.
So it was explained this time yesterday that Tonga has just had its internet
Blackwater.
basically there's a problem with the cable. Tonga doesn't have access to the internet. And I was explaining the scuttlebutt protocol and saying that basically that wouldn't be that could be a partial solution to the problem.
So we have another 5 minutes, and then we're going to share back.
On the fun versus boring side.
Yeah. It's definitely not boring. I don't know if I call it fun. Yeah, yeah. It's like a roller coaster with no safeties. I think we're good.
That's good. Oh, they contributed me some.
Yeah. We don't have anything new
blockchain would be decentralized, so I think it's like, blockchain is like highly decentralized on a highly money basis. So that's for the quadrant above us. Cold brew, it's from the tap over there.
We kind of have it as like, so the Great Wall of China now is just a tourist attraction.
No, but
it's got like an actual barrier.
I've said that I would stop.
Like, do something about it. Kind of the tourist attraction on the
Yeah, Wellington is a huge coffee city. Like, and Australia, New Zealand, generally.
Where do they get all from Southeast Asia?
But yeah, I think it's but yeah, all the
yeah, Chinese videos about some things.
It's like international research.
What do you do? Is it like,
what are the hallmarks? I mean, what are they like?
do you have a heavy
Diversity of languages on the
I mean, I love that coffee too.
Would you like to be the best
You know, I don't. I just
we can tell you we say, like, say your fellow citizens are not
I can sure.
Oh, by the copy. But like for at least the championship or whatever is the championship, is that like
Yeah, I don't know.
That's very cool.
I mean, for instance,
Oh yeah, it should be fine. It should be like, depending on the coffee, I think it should be low. It's like 200 Fahrenheit instead of 212. It's not gonna be like that. So it's like with tea. You brew different tea temperatures. So.
This is a royal user.
Yeah. I just know I drink it and I like it. I go, oh, this is awesome. For me, a good coffee is something I can drink without putting any. I don't drink black. I really enjoy it. There's not many coffees that I can do that.
Children under the age of 12 smoking ads. I've never seen it online.
Right. Weekly espresso.
All of that is
I'm incapable of making it at home. I have a dermatologist that it's like gets the job done.
so you saw the email I sent out.
Yeah. Is that, when is that again?
It's gonna happen.
Tomorrow? Okay, yeah.
I just applied for
I don't, this group doesn't need it.
They just started
We're part of two plates of discussion, so.
Strategic planning. The answer is not obvious. Thriving indigenous film incredible art. Let's adjust it right. Low hanging fruit.
I mean, it would be easy.
Make it available.
Right. Yeah.
There are filmmakers. So, and also,
Okay, so we need a
Well, that's right.
Africa.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's like what Sam was saying earlier in the exercise, where it's just like, and I'm broadly on the same page as him. I don't think the internet isolated or communities that are globally or.
Who is group one?
Take all the ones.
You're group one, right? Okay. So we're gonna ask each group to share their 3 favorite headlines. It doesn't have to be any one of these. Just share your 3 favorite headlines for the next 10 years. And we're gonna encourage folks to listen because we're gonna ask you to kind of figure out whether you identify with this vision of the world where you're working with right now, kind of in time. So, group one, take it away. What's what are your axes?
Up and to the right.
Yes.
So our axis is decentralized and human-centered. But let me think. I missed the last couple of ones, so maybe you start with the.
This might be what.
Oh yeah, this is a nice one. 60% of children under the age of 12 have never seen an online ad.
Woohoo! When is that? Is that 3? Is that 8? 10 years? What do you think?
I think we were looking at 10 years, but that was our mark. Maybe you present the, no? The one in Spanish, we have one in Spanish.
La mayoría de los gobiernos del mundo usan blockchain como estándar para transparentar gastos y contratos.
The majority of world governments are using blockchain to understand, to make transparent the contracts and agreements of the government. We've also got Australia's internet connection severed by giant squid. Aussie intranet running fine.
Anybody have any questions for this group?
Are there not more?
There are. We're just asking each group to share their top
so
3 for the moment, and then we'll be able to see all of them. Okay, group 2. Who's group 2? Over there?
Okay, so we had, do you want to hold it up? So we had human focused, relationship focused with centralized. And we're brainstorming 2 scenarios in the future, 2 like technological architectures that would emerge, which is one VR, a VR paradise / cult, and social credit score to kind of taking over. So like each of these requires a very massive technological architecture that would kind of govern these 2 different futures. And we did have we combined them too, but we'll forget about that. So one is, so Zuckerberg creates Facebook VR paradise, but also if you just switch that to Obama creates competing VR paradise, it doesn't sound as bad of a place. So the bonus of the VR paradise, and then global warming reversed thanks to VR, environmental limiting human environmental impact. Canadian health insurance, so this is for social credit. So airlines require high Facebook social score to purchase, and lower hospital wait times for good citizens as death panels introduced. We also felt that this is more immediate in the future, the social credit scores determining our future. But those are more than 3, so I'm going to pass it on.
That's great. Any questions anybody has for these? All right, group 3.
Hi, we're the Black Mirror, one of the Black Mirror scenarios. But so we had Zuck inaugurates 400th Social Credit Health Center worldwide. So we also went on the social credit side for our quadrant. This is the money-focused and centralized thing. Shocker, children denied Zucksmith's presence due to deadbeat opt-out dad. And then probably let's go with Blackwater Pinkerton Heroes bust massive data erasure terror ring.
Whoa. There we go. I was like the want to raise, get happy.
Yeah, want to raise, get happy. That was another one too.
As for mood recognition software.
Yeah. Wow, okay. Outer world of limit. Group 4?
which ones do we like best? So our Zuckerberg is mini Zucks, because just one is the tip of the Zuckerberg. So the idea is that each decentralized platform now has their own Zuckerberg. So we're going to clone him, and he's going to go to every decentralized. Also, we had decentralized but monetized decentralization. And then the other one we had, company-wise, we had Mozilla stops being dependent on Google. And then we had one we liked around biometrics. So we called them the biometric mafia. And they do like blackmail and extortion, family secrets, insurance companies. And they also have kind of hedge funds for health. So you can bid on health futures. And yeah, so our headline was the biometric mafia joins co-working space with big pharma company. And then, yeah, mesh networks are gentrified. So join your local network and get a free frappe.
So what we're going to ask you to do now is a little bit of silent time and walking. Walk through and read all 4 of them. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 quadrants. And kind of think about where you are, right? What is the world within which you're working, whether it's because you're driving this world to happen, or you're trying to stop something from happening, or maybe it's not even just me, that's a total false dichotomy. This is just a world that you're working in. Understand that like it's just for the purposes of this exercise, and that your work is not, pinpointed just within this. But yeah, and like add your own headlines if you want. Like these are your boards. So we're just gonna take a couple of minutes to kind of walk through, think about it, and then when we're done with this, we'll ask you to pair up and talk to somebody about it. So if we can really concentrate on your own thoughts for the moment, that'd be great. You can start anywhere. Do you think there should be a bad one? Yeah, then go ahead and add one if you want to. Do you want to add anything to this whole?
I don't understand it either.
What?
What do you mean? This giant squid one. Oh. It's just giant squid. How do you?
This, I mean, the independence is on a lack of enforcement, like RFCs.
But I was going back to like the original thing where it was like,
I mean, I don't know, it feels like enforcement is, I mean, that would be the central.
I know. By working on it, so it's like you would gain points.
Like there should be more than one. See a campaign.
So everything makes
Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying with,
yeah,
you
no,
know,
they
what
just
what
announce
happens?
it when it tries to cut off the ocean.
That's like voting for a speech.
Which
Maybe
is,
they should disconnect for a little while.
which is kind of, where does that, which one does that fit in, you know, I don't know.
Right, that's true.
This is the world I want to live in.
Yeah, yeah. There has to be some.
Right?
I guess if the prevailing
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it's so that's the way to do it versus mob thinking. Once you do the other is bad.
Yeah, you could go a bad way.
It's like it's feudalism, basically. It's small community. Small thinking. I think it's great.
Find a seat.
Yeah,
She's like, we're about to get into a political debate.
So if I could get one person from each group to kind of talk about, is it one person from each group? Is that what we're talking about? Or a couple people from each group, however many you want. To talk about where you see yourself in the quadrant that you chose, who's there, who's not there, what are the resources, or any other kind of points of conversation that you have. It's volunteer style.
Unless Melissa.
Or we can
picks
switch
on
it to
you, yeah.
voluntold, but yeah, go ahead.
Here.
Take the box.
Nice.
Something we talked about in this kind of decentralized and people kinship-oriented quadrant was how like the environmental impact plays a role, or how technology's impact on the environment is mitigated by kind of this community and kinship thing. So I guess that would be what's missing so far is how the environmental impact of decentralization.
Do you see your work driving that, or why does that resonate with you?
Yeah. Yeah, as an environmental scientist, like thinking about that as well.
I don't want to talk.
Anyone else from quadrant 1 to start? No?
Sorry, quadrant 1?
For me, part of the key to the happy, decentralized, people-focused future is people owning the infrastructure, building and owning their own internet infrastructure.
And that relates to your work how again, Steve?
Just like that.
Others? Anybody else? Zone 1?
Okay. Quadrant 2.
So this kind of went back to our conversation of decentralization and the defining it, and I think I realized how it was so hard for me to define from talks in the second quadrant, which I think my work corresponds to. So centralized, so my work is trying to make data centralized for scientists in a central way, so like more of a social network way. So centralization in a social way is important, but the actual infrastructure has to be decentralized, so a distributed network. But the terms centralized and decentralized in my head, like, it's very triggering because I want, scientists right now are working in an island of one, and they're like, this is my data, this is it, and my whole goal is to get everything centralized so we can all use it together. But it has to be in a decentralized infrastructure.
I can just add to that, which is even though I put myself in quadrant one, centralized is, I was telling someone earlier, centralized is a funny term because it's like, well, I run a decentralized node on a decentralized social network, but we have our own, within the context of our decentralized node, we are centralized, right? So it's like, where do you draw the lines? And so it's like there's government and nation level centralization, there's institution level centralization, there's community level centralization, there's household level centralization. So, you know, it does depend on where you draw those lines.
So spoiler alert, that's one of the things tomorrow afternoon, I guess is it, Steve, that you're running on decentralization and what it means.
Like we're already halfway through the
We're already
conversation.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
But what, yeah.
So another, what are the resources in kind of in this space, in the Q2, as you define it? What are the resources? Like, who has the money or other resources that's in this space?
So in my case, it would be whatever funds science. You have to convince them. So there has to be a change in policy to convince them to give to the reward system within science has to change, because most of the money is coming from a place where they value the wrong things. But then there are also foundations like Mozilla or the Sloan Foundation. Like, foundations are popping up to kind of like make that message clearer about open science. So there's like, I think overall we can shift the conversation so all of the money is going for good, but right now we're having to have a conversational change on what science is.
Yeah, and kind of to piggyback on that, I also put my work in this quadrant, even though I'd like to be more decentralized, but it's not yet. And it's basically like this idea where who are the people that are determining like what science is good, and so who is not in the space is kind of like the question that I'm asking, and like who can we invite and extend the question, so like what scientists should be focusing on instead of having, you know, big pharma or like values that who knows determine probably mostly money driving our own our science. And so like who are the experts, and kind of like asking these questions and bringing more of a crowdsource both questions and then like even answers. So like I put there, like, submit your top 3 questions for the next citizen science government project. It's still centralized, like the government is funding, but like we want to crowdsource where the questions the people want to see addressed.
Anybody else from Q2? Stefania, do you mind if I put you on the spot here? Do you mind explaining, you had a really good way of saying it's not that you're pushing for centralization, it's that within your world, can you talk about that one?
Yeah, so I was talking about the context of my work and like harmful content policies. I would frame it as like the key term. There is, like in my work, I'm not looking to change the current setup. So obviously the big tech companies and social media platforms and governments are the big centralized actors that are influencing what's happening. But in my work, I'm trying to push towards more consideration or focus on how those impact communities and people. So including figuring out the methodologies through which this can be assessed, and then obviously putting resources in this direction.
So Q3, who are you and what do you got?
Happy world.
That was Q3, wasn't it?
No, that was Q2.
3 is like
there was
money and centralization.
Money and centralization. Yeah, but like who is in that category? Oh, you guys? Oh.
No one volunteered afterwards to as that as their.
As their world? I think there were a few folks who were having conversations, yeah. Steve, it's not your world.
Well, I think all 4 of us have different approaches. Like some of us are like way on one spectrum, some people are in the middle. My approach is to try and reduce the harm caused through centralized efforts. So that's my approach. We basically got into also we talked about your questions, and then we got into a sub-conversation about content moderation that got us very interested.
That felt relevant at the time until we came back.
That's great. That's
Wait a
great.
minute, it's supposed to be that was decentralized. Decentralized. Listen to us.
That's great.
Did you have anything?
If you want to add, you're welcome to. But
Yeah.
okay, and then Q4.
That was the decentralized and money one. I think we both went there because we didn't see anybody there and we thought it was funny. So that was our main reasons. But I think we did have a great conversation around a lot of the issues that we're working on. One of the reasons why I enjoyed being there was specifically around the mesh networks are gentrified headline, because there's a couple things that have come up for me. First of all, I just don't think the internet is the place to be in general, and that I think that a lot of the services that folks in my communities have been using are services that existed before the internet. So when we think about like rideshare apps like Lyft and Uber, like there's been pirate taxis. If you go to Kenya, there's mutatus, there's decentralized spaces for people to access services. But then when you put an app to it, it becomes a whole nother thing and becomes more centralized. And so thinking about mesh networks as a community, an organizing space that is gentrified is really interesting, and I could see it actually happening for real, as it being used as a advertising for a community, like come to Brooklyn because there's mesh networks and you can have access to this, and so that was like part of like a conversation that we had.
Yeah, we sort of talked in the decentralized and money. We talked about the precarity of being an activist in this space. We looked at the Mozilla stops being dependent on Google Sticky, and it was this discussion about like we actually need resilient actors in this space that are going to be here forever. And so talked about how like maybe the state is really important and maybe not as sexy as a tech hybrid company but is important. And so as activists, we need to kind of like maybe think about putting your energy there. And we talked about precarity quite a bit and how things seem unstable, and oftentimes in our space we focus on the internet as that unstable thing and as the actual thing that we're trying to preserve or disrupt or change, when it's actually we're missing the point. It's just like there are shifts happening in our society that might not be just because of the internet, and like 20 years or 100 years ago, maybe people were talking about which AC current or DC current was going to be important, but it sort of feels like sometimes we're arguing those really fine details about the internet when we want to talk about capitalism or power. Is that fair?
That's great. Thank you all for being a part of this exercise, for bringing yourselves, and hopefully you felt like you could be your authentic selves with each other in these conversations. Do we want to ask these questions?
The last ones?
Yeah.
Big learnings?
Big learnings. Big learnings. That's what we have. What are some, did anybody, I'm not going to assume that anybody did, but did anybody have kind of an aha moment this morning? Yeah.
I realized some technologies that sounded very future-y to me were already like being used, like the social.
Social credit.
Yeah, exactly. Social credit scores, which is horrifying. So it's good to know.
Yeah, same thing in our group, where we talked about the gentrifying mesh networks. We talked about how in places in Latin America it's sort of like already happening that, or in other places, right, that like actually there are already kind of not so great things happening with decentralized internet networks.
Yeah, or like not diversified more than gentrified.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it begins with like no diversity because of technical issues and like first money. Right.
I'm going to say the next time you feel the urge to say mesh network, say community.
Say what?
Community networks.
Community
Mesh
networks.
is like saying blue networks. You like more blue networks. We're all community networks that can use a variety of technologies, and that's the unifying thing.
And AT&T can deploy a mesh network. It would just be their version that's not necessarily community-based.
In this case, we were talking specifically about mesh technology.
For me, I think I'm just thinking out loud now, but I think that if you're thinking of any like two-axis, four quadrants, like any way you try to frame your work, like if your work is towards moving the current debate in one or the other direction, it's kind of like almost having to invent the new language, because if you like label your work in terms of like, I mean, in my case, like, oh, intermediary reliability or content moderation, and people already assume that, oh, this is the space in which this is happening. So then it's hard to explain like what your objectives are within that space. So it might be helpful to kind of think of these dimensions and to try and come up like with the new language for your work. And that might be maybe helpful in trying to explain to people what is it that you want to do or achieve.
Yeah, and I mean, we experienced that here too, right? Like we chose centralized, decentralized because it was like, everybody in this room already kind of knows what that means. And so it's like, actually, what if we push that definition? What if we use a different set of words? We could have used colonialism, decolonialism, decolonization, I think that's the word. And then redefined it as a group and worked along that, those axes and orthogonals. So as we go into lunch, first I want to say thank you again. Second, I need 4 volunteers because tomorrow morning we're going to have a slightly different flavor of a similar conversation where we're going to ask Mark Sermon to come join us. And it would be interesting to have this conversation with him as to what are the worlds, right, that we see in the next 10 years. It can be, we're going to start off with this exercise, like what are the 4 worlds that we built, but we don't have to be locked into this tomorrow. It will be, again, a slightly different flavor. So are there, actually not are there, but who are the volunteers? I need 4, 1 to describe each world, and you can describe it as it is on paper, and then what you see of it if you'd like, or however else. Do y'all need a minute to think about it?
Maybe ask after lunch.
You need that fuel to figure out if you want to talk about it tomorrow morning? That's fair. I'm happy to figure that out, but I can say that if I don't get 4, someone's going to be voluntold. We'll pick names out of a hat. But great, yeah, thanks for this. And I think the reason we start off this week with this sort of exercise is we'd love for you to stay in kind of the big picture, big world space throughout the week. Whatever questions you have, whatever conversations you're having, be imaginative, but rooted in practicality. Thanks. And do we have one in a minute? In a minute.
Close.
It's coming. I think it's Taco Tuesday. Cool.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope to
That
have
was
more
good.
conversations
Now I'm
about
gonna
your dog. Yeah.
Now I gotta.
I think Steve, the main character is volatile. I think give you one good one.
Okay.
She's gonna start out here. I mean, it's just a suggestion.
Near Rochester, New York. So funny. So I think we're waiting on people to wrap up from their right, the session that's wrapping up now.
Okay.
So they should be here soon.
Cool.
Did that show up? No, we don't do that. There we go. Many, many.
They're wrapping up now. Like, oh yeah, I forgot where a camera is. Like 3 minutes?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you hear that, Jesse?
What'd you say?
We're gonna start in like 3 minutes. They're just wrapping up now.
Okay, I heard clapping, so I assumed.
How many people are going to be here?
I can see who RSVP'd.
Okay, so that was accurate then. Looked like 16. Okay. So
Because I asked for people if like, please say yes if you're coming to the session.
got it. Okay. So not
we
all
know.
the fellows go to all the sessions.
Correct. They're
Got it.
invited, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Yeah.
So we should
okay.
have that. Oh, perfect. And thank you for doing this. Thank you both of you for doing this.
Yeah, definitely. That'll be fun. So I think
We're
the kind of
excited.
big group is, and we're going to leave some good amount of time for like Q&A and discussion.
Absolutely.
And if it's real big, we may. I thought we would divide up and have people talk to her in video, but
Yeah, we can.
we just may have to figure out
Well-
how to do that. I guess someone could use their laptop. And run
Correct.
the video, right?
I can set up a laptop and people can jump into that.
Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds good.
Perfect.
Cool.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much for all your tech support.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's what it says on my it says what on business card, Jesse. It's leadership program coordinator / computer gremlin / professional cat wrangler. That's Anne-Marie Crothers.
Good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Welcome, everybody. I know it sounds like it was such a packed session with Alan Davidson. I'm glad, definitely, you can take 60 seconds to grab a quick refreshment if you need more refreshments. And please, if you are joining us for the fundraising workshop, please grab a seat in the Commons. If you are not joining us for the session on fundraising, then definitely maybe work in another space if you'd like. There's tons of other spaces, or hang out in the public space or things like that. But if you're joining us, then please grab a seat in the Commons. Yes, this is filmed.
Jesse's title is development
officer. Yeah.
Development officer. Okay.
I think I called her something else in the slides, but yeah.
Perfect.
All right, perfect. Well, welcome to a session I'm very, very excited for, mostly because it involves some of my favorite people at Mozilla. The one who you see in person before you, Juan, who is our director of fundraising and has graciously agreed to come deliver this in person. And then Jesse Keating, who I know several of you have met before at All Hands, who is our development officer on the fundraising team. They've graciously provided this fundraising workshop. We're going to go through some slides, and then we can actually split out into two groups for folks who would like to speak with Juan in person, kind of have a discussion, and those who would like to speak with Jesse Keating over video. I will set up a video shortly. Perfect. And without further ado, Juan, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So everyone I'm talking to is here. Are you with us as well? You are? Okay, good. All right, excellent. Well, I'm glad to be here. I think I was here about a year ago as well, too. Different faces, similar topic. So, before we really dive into what this workshop will be about, I just have a couple of questions to get a sense for the room. One, how many people in here have actually asked for money to support something that they are working on, so a grant or a donation? Okay, so almost all of you at this point have done it. Okay, great. How many of you felt comfortable doing it? Okay, that's good. Got one strong arm here. How many of you like doing it? Okay, we got 2 likes. Yay!
We were discussing it. It's because it's been good so far. Yeah.
It helps when it's good, right? It's terrible when it's bad. Good. Well, that makes total sense. I mean, I think as we talk about fundraising and we get into money conversations, it brings up a lot of feelings of discomfort and raises all sorts of issues and dynamics we might have ourselves around money. And as fundraisers ourselves, we always grapple with this. But what I really hope from today's workshop, where Jesse and I will share some learnings with you, and we will try very quickly to get into the nitty-gritty, and then just do some breakouts to really talk with you about what you're working on and really helping you think about what are some next steps for you as your projects continue, to how you might get funding and partners for that. I also wanted to make sure that you had a good sense for how the foundation does its fundraising, so that you have the financial landscape here, understand our process, which I think will help you understand the foundation better, but also will be illuminating for you as you think about your own fundraising work and think about the process that you might follow. And then Jessie will actually be talking you through a very cool slide deck that I think she'd sent out a couple weeks ago, about how to build out your case for support and approach funders. And I know that Julia, it sounds like, used it and has had some really great success with it. So we may ask Julia to really speak to that as well. Did everybody get that slide deck earlier from before? I think it's called Building the Case for Support. All right, if not, we'll recirculate it. There's some really good links in there that Jesse included that I think will be especially helpful tools for you as you go forward. So again, I pretty much met everyone here, but I'm Juan Barajas. I'm our Director of Fundraising and Partnerships. And fundraising at the Mozilla Foundation is actually a lot of fun. I've been fundraising now for about 20 years, and mostly been in places where each year starts at 0, meaning that there's often no sort of predetermined set of money that you start from every year. So there's a little bit of a, oh God, are we going to be able to do this with people on payroll and promises that we have? And so it was a more stressful way of fundraising, often with younger or more temporary organizations that were doing it. My last job was working on the Freedom to Marry campaign here in the United States that won the Freedom to Marry for gay people in the U.S. It was a time-limited campaign, and we ran like a campaign, but that also meant money was always being chased. We had a lot of success towards the end, but it was never a moment without high levels of anxiety and stress, not from the fundraising part per se, but always trying to basically close the deal and collect the money. So I come from that kind of space, a much more grassroots, almost political fundraising background. The great thing about Mozilla, and I have slides, I always forget to use my slides. The great thing about Mozilla is we own this big, beautiful company, Mozilla Corporation, which makes Firefox. Firefox is, of course, I think probably what we're best known for, and there are goods and bads to that, but certainly what we are known for. And the way that the funding is set up actually is that this company, has employees and they make this amazing product that hundreds of millions of people use, and we get a share of the revenue that creates essentially the base for our funding here. So approximately, and these are approximate percentages, approximately half of our annual funding actually comes from Firefox royalties. So there's an agreement set up with the company to do that. What our fundraising team does, so what Jesse and I do along with the other folks, is essentially leverage that money. We work with our partners in philanthropy, whether they're foundations and increasingly companies and individuals, to help bring their philanthropy into technology and to align it with our goals and our strategies for how we see the internet becoming healthier. So we do this essentially as like a dollar for dollar match. And again, these are approximations that kind of will vary on the year depending on what the market looks like and how things are going. But this is roughly the way it shapes out. And that dollar for dollar match breaks down to about 30% of those charitable dollars coming from foundation grants, 18% coming from individuals, primarily through our email list, and that's a lot of smaller dollar gifts, anything from $3 up to a few $1,000s. And then other just represents like investment income that we might have, a small bit from ticket sales at MozFest. So it's a teeny bit, but it still represents about 1%. And then depending on the year, we seem to fluctuate between 22 to 25 million per year. So it's a bit of money to do some work. Now, keeping in mind, of course, that the space we're working in is often companies that are, having more than that, 9, 10, 11 figure sorts of budgets. So we're still pretty small compared to that, but we certainly punch above our weight and certainly use the Mozilla brand to do that. So the team that helps drive this, I've listed them all up here. That might look smallish. I know you can see it okay. So these are the colleagues I get to work with. So Jessie Keating, who's on our screen here, is our Foundation Grants Officer, Development Officer. What that means is she's really working our strategy to bring in those foundation grants. So, beyond even just, she does the proposal writing and concept note writing with our staff, but also thinking through strategy, getting the meetings, getting the research done, supporting our program staff and our executive director to be prepared for road shows we might do, is basically what we call them, when we travel around and meet with a group of funders to update them on our work, hear what they're up to, figure out what the overlap might be. Jesse Ward, who's our major gift officer, he sits with me upstairs. He is really focused on growing our individual grouping and getting folks to give $1,000 or more per year. We have a lot of potential here, and so we're focusing on growing this. He's also taking on the corporate asks as well. So he's got a nice full plate, and he's actually up there right now because he has a huge amount of stuff to do. So I let him hang out there and keep going on our giant corporate list, which basically means that we're looking for MozFest sponsorships, and we seek out companies that are mission aligned, that make sense, that are gonna be beneficial to the audience at MozFest as well as to us and to that company. Will Easton is our email fundraising lead, so he's the person that really drives all of our email asks and really thinking through what is our content strategy for email itself, which is increasingly becoming more important. And Stephanie Lowry, she does our donor services. So when you have lots of donors and you have lots of little gifts, you get lots of questions, you get lots of complaints, you get lots of concerns, you get lots of sweet love notes, and you need someone to respond to those, because otherwise you could be walking away from potential second gifts, renewal gifts, or people even making their gift. The number of people who have credit card problems trying to process a donation is pretty interesting. So a lot of it's around like, well, did you enter the whole credit card number? Not quite that simple, but she does an amazing job of working these cases. Our team jumped in at the end of the year when we get a lot of people donating towards the end of December. And it was really eye-opening to be part of that, and really deepen my respect even more for her and for that work to really tend to the needs of all of our individual donors. So our work then really is, as a fundraising team, is to make sure, of course, that we do that dollar for dollar match, right? We're raising about 10 to 12 million a year charitably. So we're finding and qualifying prospective leads, right? Lots of people can have great ideas. They could be like, you know who you need? Oprah Winfrey. If you could just get her to host an event, you could just get her to do a YouTube video for you. Oh, why didn't I think of that? Well, do you know Oprah Winfrey? Do you know she cares about this? Do you have access to her? That's the kind of stuff that we might qualify. So lots of great ideas, and I'm being a bit silly with the Oprah Winfrey example, although you'd be surprised at how many times she gets mentioned as someone that you should just approach and you'd solve all your problems. Once we do get a real group of qualified leads, you really find people that are very excited about what you want to do or foundations. Then you've got to really think about what's your strategy, what's your play for this. What work do you think that they're going to be interested in? Do you even know yet? So you've got to basically build out your roadmap for how you want to approach the person, the foundation, or the company. So that's what we work on with our staff, partners, and others to do as well. We really make sure we drive in the process all the way through. You create the plan. It's only as good as how much you work it. So our job primarily boils down to working the plan. Always working the plan and making updates because, of course, people are people. Things change, and so you have to make sure that you are adapting to the current landscape, to the current setup, to people's current situations. And so that's our job, is to stay on top of that and make sure we're updated. We really drive all phases of proposal development and grants management. This is always done with others. We ourselves are not experts on all the great, amazing things that Mozilla does. We know a lot, but we're not the experts. But we will really partner up with staff and fellows to actually build out and develop these proposals. And then maximizing these funder relations. So you get the grant, you got to already start thinking about how you're going to renew the grant. How are you going to steward them with good reporting and inviting them to events and making sure that they have some great one-on-one access to maybe the people you're working with that are really cool and super smart in what they do. You really want to be thinking, how do you build that relationship? Because ultimately, that's what it boils down to, is relationships. So before we get too deep into the nitty-gritty, what I really want to talk about are what are some of the truths then here about fundraising? Because I had asked you earlier about comfort with money, comfort with asking, and if you liked it. Unfortunately, I have a few people that do, so that makes me very happy. Because I do like it. I think that there's something really powerful and inspiring about bringing someone in to a vision that you have and that you share and helping them be part of making change. And that's what this is really about. And the money is part of that. It is not the only thing. It is an end result of a good relationship, building process of bringing folks along and then doing something together. So a couple of truths about fundraising just to keep in mind as you think about and approach the work. First and foremost, fundraising really actually isn't about the money. So like I said, it's a really good and important end result, right? It gets things done. But if you truly want to sustain yourself, you truly want to make a difference and achieve your goals and mission, you got to make friends. And you want to treat these folks just like you would treat your friends, right? You don't just come to them once per year when you need a ride at the airport. You tend to the relationship, right? You're always making sure that you're in touch with one another and that you care about each other. So it has to be authentic. So it really is about friend raising first. Fundraising is not magic. There is no sort of sorcery that takes place behind the walls of Mozilla to bring in dollars or any nonprofit. It's really planning. It's time and it's patience. And this is the bulk of the work, frankly. It is a lot of this, of the planning, getting the time, getting in front of folks, and then being patient with the process. And then knowing what to do if someone says yes, no, or not now. How do you come back to those responses? How do you continue to bring people along? Fourth is you actually have to ask to get the donation. It's surprising how often sometimes fundraising campaigns will not succeed. And mostly because people weren't getting asked. They get stuck in the cultivation. They get stuck in the show and tell and the courtship and essentially the dating process that goes on. You got to get to the ask at some point. And there is a bit of an art to this, right? There's some science, but there's art. The magical question that I love to hear from a funder or donor is you've done some great cultivation and they're so excited and they go, how can I help? That is like the most perfect entryway to make your ask. Doesn't always play out that way, but when it does, you know that you've actually worked a little bit of magic up here. And then lastly, make sure you don't look at your donors, your funders, your prospects as ATMs. Again, it comes back to that relationship piece. If you treat them as an ATM, they will run out of money and turn off. So you really want to make sure that you're tending to the relationship. Lots of reports, good updates, invite them to events, bring them to your presentations, whatever it is that engages them in the work and seeks their input and their participation. So when you get down to it, they're really sort of like big 5 steps in fundraising. You're always prospecting. Who are your leads? Who you're going to be talking to? Preparing for that, meaning what's your case for support? Where does the money go? How are you going to make a difference here? How are you going to predispose folks? How are you going to get that face-to-face meeting? Getting the meeting is often one of the biggest hurdles, and once you get there, you find that things start to fall in place a little bit easier. Are you ready to present? Have you prepared your elevator pitch? Have you prepared an easy way for people to understand your idea, what you're trying to achieve, and how you're going to achieve it? And are you ready to do follow-up? Got to move fast? Don't want to drag your feet? Do you know how to close the deal? So that's what we're going to talk about now. That's what we have our superstar Jessie up here in living color on this nice big screen. She will take it from here, and then we will break out into groups so that we can really get into the details. Before I do that, though, any questions for me before I do turn it over to Jessie? Great. All right. Jessie, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Just a little bit about me, as Juan said, I am the development officer here. I work mostly on institutional giving, institutional grants from foundations. And I have been a grassroots fundraiser, much like Juan, for most of my career, the last probably 10 to 12 years. At organizations where I was probably also starting from zero. I founded my own nonprofit here in upstate New York several years ago, and then moved on to work in a school setting for a while, and then I did some work around child sexual abuse for the last 4 years before I joined with Mozilla, which is now my home, and it's an incredible place to work, and I'm so grateful that you all are here today. As Juan said, I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty with you. Let's see. Let's go to
Maybe
the
1
next
second,
slide,
Jessie. I
please.
think the volume's
Yeah.
a little low here. We're trying to turn it up.
Oh, okay. Let me know. Test.
Are you maxed out on your side too, Jessie?
Yes, I think so. I'm testing. Hold on. One sec.
We're at max? Okay. Try again, Jessie.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Is that better? Okay.
Is that a little better?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
go on,
good.
Jessie.
Okay, so as Juan said, I'm going to get into the nitty gritty around those 5 basic steps in fundraising: the prospecting, prepare, predispose, present, and follow up. These are, while they are kind of the general steps, it's a bit of a simplification. There are many, many steps in between here, but this is the direction and the plan that you need to go down in order to get to the money. So are you on the prospecting slide? Yes, you are. Let's talk about prospecting. Before you really do anything, you want to know who you're going to approach in the foundation field to ask for money. Who has capacity? Who has affinity? Who is aligned strategically with the work that you are doing? And how do I find these people? How do I build my pipeline? Essentially, building a funder pipeline involves researching, prioritizing, and maintaining truly a living list of foundations and corporations, wealthy individuals with those aligned missions and values, venture capitalists, larger organizations that could perhaps incubate your program. The way to build that list is really to use both organic and research-generated sources to find those leads. So by research generated, I mean you can, at industry events, you'll find funders and sponsors that attend those or sponsor those kinds of convenings. So get a list of RSVPs before you go. Find out what foundations might perhaps be in the room. Take a good look at
who the sponsors are of the event and put those folks on your list. You can ask your networks in the fields that you are specifically focused on. Make sure that you're asking around, where do I go for funding? Who are the foundations that are interested in the kind of work that I'm doing? You can certainly start research just on your own, going through fundraising industry websites like Inside Philanthropy and Foundation Center. And while you're here at Mozilla, you're welcome to use and have access to our subscriptions to those organizations. They're super helpful. You can plug in some words and get long lists of foundations that perhaps would be helpful to you. And certainly you can start to research foundation websites and make sure you're reading their blogs and looking at their board lists and really digging in. There's a lot of work that you can do on your own before you venture out into the fundraising world. Next slide, please. Juan mentioned a little bit about your elevator speech. So as you are at these convenings, as you are at conferences in the industry, you want to be able to talk about your project in a way that makes people listen. And an elevator speech is something you should really be able to say in your sleep. And you want to hit the most impactful and kind of maybe surprising facts about the work you're doing and the impact that it has and that it has the potential to have on the world. So, for example, when I worked at the Child Sexual Abuse Agency, when I would talk to people, I could still remember my pitch. It was, hey, did you know that 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by the time they are 18 years old? And most never even disclose that as adults because 90% of their abusers are someone they know, love, and trust. And here's what my organization does. We provide all these services under one roof, et cetera. So I can still rattle that off in about a minute or less. And you should be able to do that. So we have provided a number of resources for you to use to really nail down your elevator pitch. And if you go to the next slide, again, here is the face that you are looking for. You want people to be super excited about what it is that you are proposing to do, and you want to leave them with questions, and you want them to want to know more. The next slide, please. When you have time, this woman, Sam Horn, is an expert on what she calls how to create intrigue and connect with anyone. So this 17-minute quick video is a really fun primer for you to watch on your own time and just kind of think about some of the ways that she proposes putting together your elevator pitch. Next slide, please, Juan. So the next P in this list is prepare, and it's about knowing the answers before you reach out or go into a funder meeting, knowing the answers to the questions of what are you doing, what do you want, and why does it matter? And the fourth, which I think is one of the most important questions, is how will this project advance the funder's mission? You want to go in there. Everybody has a job to do at the foundation. You want to be able to meet with a program officer or with a major donor and understand first what it is that they need to move the needle on in their world. So one of the ways that you really need to prepare to do that is to nail your case for support. And essentially that your concept note is very brief way of getting these answers across quickly and clearly and concisely. If you need help putting one together, I've put several resources on this slide deck, which we will provide for you later if you don't have it. But it will help you really think through how to clearly convey what it is that your project is about, what you need money for, what you're trying to do. So take a look at that project design template when you get a chance, and that can help. This is a tool that will essentially have you ask you key questions that can help you think logically about the project that you want funded. Step number 2 is take the 1-sentence summary challenge, which is, see if you can put that together. quickly and impactfully, and it takes more work than you think because you really are condensing all of this important work that you do into one sentence. There are a couple of concept note examples here for you to dig into, and I'd highly recommend also, actually, if Julia allows me, to allow her to post her concept note in here as well. What we eventually worked together to come up with is an excellent example of a concept note for using with funders. So, and then the last resource there is a template that you can follow. So it's pretty clear. So by the end of this little exercise, you should have a nice concept note available to use. So the next slide, please. We are now in predispose mode. As Juan said, predisposing it's really getting that face-to-face visit. Nothing raises money more than a face-to-face visit with someone and a deep connection and the cultivation of a relationship. So how do you get a face-to-face visit? The best possible way forward in that is to get an introduction from someone, a mutual colleague, another foundation, something where you get that introduction and someone can vouch for you. You can also send a powerful email to a program officer. Ask for advice. Ask them out to coffee. We just want an exchange of ideas to happen here. This isn't, as Juan said, it's a first date. You never ask for money on the first date, and it's really the beginning of a relationship. So, another way to do that is to ensure that you're sending them your best work, via email before you meet with them, so they get like your concept note, any published articles that you may have, any glowing referrals that you can get from a mutual colleague. You can be super creative here to get that meeting. But again, I harken back to what I said originally, which is get an introduction from someone if you can. There's a million degrees of separation between funders and the folks that you work with in your fields. Okay, next slide. So you got your meeting and you're wondering, okay, what do I need to do to show up? And what are we going to talk about? And am I going to be talking the whole time at this person? The answer to that is no, never. It is a conversation. You're going to have coffee with a friend, essentially, or a colleague, to talk about your work and talk about what their work is and what their interests are. And it's really a reciprocal conversation. So essentially, in this slide, I've put a link to a list of really powerful questions that can have a few of them in your back pocket. They can really instigate a great conversation. They can help, if they say, well, look, we don't have any funds for this right now. You don't just have to say, oh, okay, see you later. I mean, there are other questions you can ask, like, do you know any other funders? Do you have any other colleagues you'd be willing to introduce me to? Is there another program officer at your foundation or at another foundation? Or what advice do you have for me to move forward on this? Get feedback. Always be soliciting feedback and always be soliciting what's the next step for me? And those powerful questions are worth your time looking through and keeping committing a few of those to memory. You want to be sure that you can answer the top 3 questions of every investor, which is, why do you exist? What's your purpose? That's the kind of 30,000-foot view of things. Where does the money go? Which is, what are your priorities here? What's the kind of 13,000-foot view with your project? And as Juan said, you want to get them to say, how can I help? So you have to be ready to answer how they can help, whether it's listing out, coming prepared in your head with kind of an itemized list of kind of how much money you need to do what in this 1 year in a limited time frame. So be prepared to answer those questions, because you don't just want to throw a number out at them. You want to be very thoughtful and planful about the work that you're doing and what you're asking for. Okay, next slide.
Jesse, there's a question.
Oh, sure.
Another one that sorry. Is that okay? If I interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that okay, Jesse? We're just getting a microphone, Jesse, so she can ask a question.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Oh, hi. So I just want to say the fourth one that I always got asked is also like, where do you want to be after the money? Like, so what's the goal? And that was very hard for me because it's just like, it goes down into terms of like measurable impact. That is always hard, specifically for some projects more than others. But it's like giving us they want to have basically a number that they can say, okay, so we'll see if you actually did what you said you did at the end of this. And anyway, it's a hard one for me to answer. So, but I always got asked that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually part of the concept note template. You'll see you really got to think through, how do you plan to measure and evaluate your work, and what's the outcome? How do you want to see the world change as a result? What is it that you think that you can do with this project and with the money that I give you to have that kind of impact? So that's absolutely right. Thank you for saying that. Okay, so the last slide here is about follow-up. Do not miss a beat in follow-up. I cannot say strongly enough that immediately send a thank you note, an email, or something that summarizes your meeting and really lists the steps that you discussed, any next steps, and then please execute on those next steps immediately and flawlessly. If you don't get the answers that you want, or you don't hear back when you want to, it's okay to continue to reach out until you get your answers. But I would not, this is not harassment. It is not, it's just, my theory is just keep asking until you get an answer. And the answer can be no. It can be yes, submit a proposal. I'm totally interested in your project. It could be not right now, but stay in touch. And at which time you can ask, when is it okay for me to reach out again? When would it be convenient for you? Or when do you think you'll know more about your initiative or have money in place to have another conversation? And if they say, sorry, we're not interested, again, here's your opportunity. Well, do you know other foundations or program officers that I can talk to who might have interest? And can you introduce me? Those are things to think of. Don't just take the no. At a certain point, it'll come clear when it's time to move on. But I like the kind of rule of 3, 3 times and then you're out. So yes, please do follow up quickly, and that's how you close the deal. So at this time, before we go to questions, I would love to have you hear from Julia, if she's willing and able to come up and just give a quick overview of what's going on with her project and how we worked together with her. I just want to say to folks that given enough lead time, I am here to help you with your concept notes with any stage of this process. It's really important to us to launch you out of Mozilla when you're offboarding and you're ready to go out into the world with your project. And so anything that I can do personally to help, Julia can kind of tell you what our working relationship was like together, and then how some of the results that she was able to get because of the work and because of her incredible tenacity and and innate fundraising ability. So thank you, Julia.
Well, thanks, Jesse. I have to say too, it's funny when you asked if anybody had fundraised before. I didn't raise my hand because I haven't gotten to the ask point yet, but I guess I should have raised my hand anyway.
Definitely.
So this is a really new space for me, and actually at All Hands was the first time I really talked to Jesse about this at all, and was really interested in this toolkit of slides and links and concept note templates. And it was actually a couple days later that funders approached me and asked if I would come to a panel of interested people who wanted to invest in ocean data science, and they had heard about me from several different ways, and could I come and speak to this panel? And so I was like, this is awesome, and I was also totally overwhelmed. So I talked to Jessie immediately, and I was able to walk through the toolkit with her and also get started pretty immediately on my concept note. which I have like a physical copy, and we can also share it around here. But Jesse had this template to start helping me think of helping me prepare, basically, because at this point, I knew that I was going to be in a room of people. I don't know how many, I don't know who they are, and I will be given a chance to speak about my experience and what I'm doing, and I don't know how long. It could have been 4 minutes, it could have been 20 minutes. I don't know if there's slides or not. There's like a lot of questions, and so putting together this concept note was super helpful, and Jesse's template has like, it kind of, helps you get to those, the 30,000 foot view, down to the 3 foot view with really nicely laid out. And so we worked on that kind of intermittently throughout the beginning of January together, kind of chatting over Slack a couple times, being like, my edits are done, go ahead and have a look and incorporate. And yeah, a lot of it was really hard to do. Like, I'd have whole sections where I'm like, I don't know how to phrase this or what to think about. But it was really great to spend all that time preparing. And then so I had it in hand and learned then that I had 4 minutes to give my talk with no slides. And then I also got a list of the organizations that would be there, but not the people. So, we were talking to Jesse and then also the people at UC Santa Barbara about doing research on who would be there, but we didn't know even the organizations until the day before. But it was all great. My little panel talk went well, but it was really like the one-on-one connections I was able to have with people during coffee. It was really useful, and those were the people that I actually followed up with. I didn't follow up with everybody, but I followed up with people that that actually seemed interested or that I had talked to at all. So I didn't do everybody that was just in the room. But from that, I had somebody who did want to have a meeting with me, a one-on-one meeting, and I again found out that meeting was happening like 24 hours before it was happening, so I didn't have a lot of time to do all of the research on everything that I would have liked to. But something I learned going into that meeting, I expected that he wanted to meet me because he had heard me talk about my stuff and wanted to like hear what I needed. And so I sort of came in with my concept note and like was ready to go into my spiel, and really like it was him talking for like 12 minutes about everything he was excited about, and then asking me targeted questions about, like, from my expertise, what could help him move forward. And so I kind of had to shift and then talk, which was fine, but like talk about what's going on in our community and what other groups are doing cool things so that he could see that space. And then I was also able to then say, oh, and once you like can look into that stuff, like, I'm sort of downstream of that, trying to help people develop the tools in order to participate in that kind of stuff. So it was definitely not an ask on the first date, because it was all about sort of building this relationship and having him see that I'm like a person he can come to like ask for questions and get connected with people, but not necessarily he was interested in like immediately what I was doing. So it was really good actually for me to learn going into this, and I've got a couple other meetings lined up now from this same fundraising opportunity or funders opportunity. So I'm gonna try to take what I've learned so far, but yeah, it is so much about like having a clear plan for articulating what you're doing, but then just listening to what they're saying and sort of building a relationship. I was trying to think if I had other little notes. Yeah, one question I actually had is if you do get the question of how can I help, like I've been kind of thinking about having like a menu of options, like anything from like, oh, well, I need this to sustain things on a shoestring for a year versus this is my vision of how we could build something sustainably over 3 years or something, or is that too, is that still too vague, or is that, how do you answer that question, and then
that is a great
ease into it?
Yeah, that's a great start. I mean, having a menu for them to choose from shows that you've thought through it quite, clearly, and that you have ideas about sort of short-term, medium, and long-term goals. So, yeah, I would absolutely say that a menu is a great idea, and to certainly have things in limited time frame. So in 1 year, I need this, and so I can do this, this, and this. In 3 years, here's what my vision is, and that doesn't, you're not nailing yourself to that. That is what you think is going to happen, and every funder understands that, like any budget, it's just it's a good guess, you know, an educated guess.
Okay, cool. That's really helpful. I think right now in my concept note, I have like a single ask. And so I was thinking of either removing the single ask or sort of trying to have more of a scoping or menu type of idea.
Yeah, I like the menu, and I like the you know, how many employees or staff do you think you would need, and what are the projects, and how much does you know, when we're putting a budget together, we're looking at, you know, one fellow costs X amount, and when we think about that, what's incorporated in that is travel and healthcare and all the different things that you don't have to get that in the weeds so early on, but to kind of think through what the bigger costs are going to be is important, especially, and also, you know, making sure you're getting paid, you're getting yourself paid to do the work.
Right.
I think of it too as how can I dial up or down? So what's your minimally viable product that you can put out? And thinking about it as a minimally viable product, so you can dial up or down. So if it is, you know, these three things are the minimal part, you could have that there to the most. Now thinking about like the psychology of how you pitch this, think about what you lead with first. There's various sort of data to show, like usually like the first thing in a string is what people will go towards. So think about that, but be careful not to offer up something that actually really won't help you in the end.
Right.
And I would go for the harder, or not the harder, the clearer thing first. And then once you get a yes to that, then I often want to know, like, can you introduce this to more people? Would you host something? Would you broker a meeting for us? Like,
right.
So I would make those sort of secondary questions after. So make sure your menu is really something that allows you to do your work, whatever that is.
Cool. Great. Thanks.
And I think it's important too to say, you know, around your work, Julia, is that, you know, your first meeting, I think, was with the Science Philanthropy Alliance, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so that's a consortium of philanthropists that are focused on science. That's a really smart entry point, because then you get kind of more bang for your buck. And, you know, you were able to have dinner, I think you said, with the executive director, and then really talk through like what it is that you're looking for, and you know, landed some really great meetings out of that. So again, a good way to think about getting in the door to many different funders at one time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I should have said that too. Yeah, this alliance of science philanthropists is this incredible group that I didn't know existed, or that even that concept existed. But their role is to broker philanthropists to the scientists that need that, and so they're trying to play matchmaker. And so the more that they know about me, and the more time I can spend kind of talking to them, the better, which is pretty awesome. But Jesse helped me a lot, like talking through what I would even say on those first calls with them when they were trying to understand if they would even invite me to this thing. And then also, Kevin also helped me sort of practice my pitch once once I found out it was 4 minutes, he helped me sort of talk that through. But the concept note was honestly, it was like highlighting little pieces from the concept note and being like, this is going to be my story, was really helpful after spending all this time to get that down on paper.
Yeah, your concept note, if it's 1 to 3 pages long, everything that you need from your elevator speech to your 4-minute pitch exists in there, should exist in there. And so once that gets nailed down, a lot of diamonds can come out of that.
Yeah, but I'm still very uncomfortable, like actually with the ask and talking about money. So like that will be the next thing to tackle. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
We'll get there.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Split into groups. All right, so for those who have questions or would like some one-on-one time to talk with Juan or Jesse, those who would like to chat with Juan, feel free to make your way into the public space, and this way folks can grab microphones and see Jesse on the big screen, and also she'll be able to hear you over the microphone. So for those talking to Jesse, stay here. For those who'd like to speak with Juan, go ahead and walk with Juan into the public space.
We can kind of do anything.
They can answer your questions. There's no major difference. They can both answer questions. They're wonderful people.
It's okay. I want to get a call with her, but I'm gonna go do that.
Are you staying and talking? Or are you just hanging out? Are you staying? No? Would you like to speak? A question for Jesse?
Hi, Jesse. How are you?
Hi.
Weird to
good.
talk to a screen. But so I have been having a bit of a struggle on thinking that it is a possibility to go on my own and have like a group and do autonomous work, because I have been like some like small women founders have looked for me to talk, but what they have to offer, it's like it's not a real a long-term proposition. It's like micro founds or founds that I can do a job for like 5 months or 6 months, but then I have to think on my life. I mean, I cannot just like forget that I have monthly bills to pay and just say, okay, I'm going to work for you for 3 months and put myself in there, and then I don't know what's going to happen with my life. But at the same time, you cannot, I don't know, I think it's hard to just start a relationship with a person saying like, I mean, I need you to compromise with me for at least a year so I can do a valuable job. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able. So it's hard to start. I mean, how can I understand also that maybe founders feel a little bit like, am I going to just like give this person stability for a year if I don't know them? But at the same time, it's so hard because I cannot stop having a regular job and just do and compromise with the work I want to unless I have stability. You get that? So how?
Yeah, completely. And it was one of the things, and I can point to Julia again to say that she has kind of taken up residence inside of a larger organization that is very much aligned with her project. And it's, in a way, it's a nice transition tool to see, to kind of have a home base with a salary and be able to work on this project and incubate it and use that larger organization perhaps as a fiscal sponsor so that you don't have to create your own nonprofit, and you can actually see if it's a viable idea that funders are really interested in. And, you know, there are lots of different ways to do this. Not every single one of us is meant to go out on our own and get fully funded right away. So, yeah, I mean, if you can get yourself into a situation where you feel you can do your best work, you can still pay your bills, and you can get make some progress on your project and some notable impact on, almost like, you know, where you are at Mozilla, you know, a larger platform to help to publicize your work and to be the fuel in your engine as you're trying to grow. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, but yes, still it's just a matter of doing the things I want to do as a side project and not as my main project, and that somehow like harms the job and makes me really exhausted. That's what I was trying to like change this with but I guess there's no.
Yeah, because when you're doing it, you're
using
using up a lot of your energy, right, at a quote unquote real job or full-time job. And, you know, when really you're saying your side project is the main thing, your main passion. Am I hearing that right?
Well, yes. I mean, no, it's all together, but like how to keep on doing the things after the fellowship, but without, without the institutional support, because that's
Right.
something that really helps.
Well, I mean, I would love to talk with you further. Maybe, as I said earlier, I'm so happy to help fellows with any of this and thinking through some things. So feel free to, book some time with me in my schedule. I would love to hear more about your particular project, and perhaps we can come up with some ideas so you can continue to do this work with institutional support. In a way that's meaningful and advances your cause.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions? I can't even see really who's in the room. It's so weird. I'm talking into the
I don't
abyss.
know where the camera is.
I saw your hand.
Okay. I think I have 3 questions, very different one from the other. One is, but most of them are related to different tips or connections that you may be already aware of, and I could just reach out to. One is for funding for development, technical development. One is more overarching, let's say. I'm doing work on data ownership, which is going to be a more and more present topic that we would need to discuss in a broader community. I'm not sure how to continue this work after my fellowship, and who of the funders are interested in supporting this type of work, which is not in the trenches at this point, but will be in the near future. And third, I'm coming from a small digital rights organization who has traditionally only worked on projects, never had core funding. And I would like to grow this organization and find ways to bring support from outside.
Okay, so what you're asking, are you asking for specific foundations or funders that would be interested in data ownership and technical development?
So the second and the third question are separate from each other.
Right. It sounds to me like you're looking for possibly help building your pipeline, correct, of funders. So like which funders would be interested and aligned with the work that you're doing, and then how do you grow the organization that you said doesn't get core support but really focuses on projects?
The work is not going to be necessarily connected to the digital rights organization that I want to grow.
Okay, got it. Again, I would totally love to meet with you one-on-one, and we can talk about funders, and we can also talk about tactics on growing, this organization. I'd have lots and lots of questions about what the organization looks like right now, how many members are in it, where do you get the funding for projects? I mean, do you have answers to that?
I do.
I would love,
but they're
yeah,
not
I don't know
promising.
and I have no idea how many people are in the room, so I'd love to get into specifics with you.
I think people are busy with other stuff, but at any point, if anybody wants to address some questions to Jessie, just stop me.
All right, good. So tell me about your organization, about the Small Digital Rights Org. Where do you get the project funding right now, or in the past?
We got it from American Bar Association, from Open Society Foundation, from Norwegian funds. So countries outside the European Union in the EEA zone have this funding support program for European members, and we accessed
Got
one
it.
of those. And
Okay. What's the structure of the org like? Is there an executive director? Is there a kind of a general project manager? How many folks are working in the organization?
So the organization has a board which is not involved in daily not even in strategy, not in daily activities, basically just by name. And then an active executive director, which is hoping to get a successor or to be much less involved in running the organization.
Okay. Is the executive director working as a volunteer, or is it a paid position?
No, everybody is working as a volunteer. For
Gotcha.
a lot of years now.
How many years exactly? Like, are people burned out? Is it feeling like
since 2004?
Okay. And have you ever asked for core funding for the group, or just project funding? Have you ever said, let's present this as we've been able to do these projects and show impact in such a way that we'd like to solidify our structure and go to a funder and ask for some operational funds. Have you guys gone down that path yet?
In the projects that we did, we tried to allocate operational funds. So this is how we went about it. But no, we didn't specifically ask for core funding because it is my assumption, or the general assumption, that funders would need some sort of hard policies already in place, which is not the case for this organization.
Is it possible is there a larger organization doing this kind of work that you could potentially merge with, or has it been generally, are you doing something unique in the space?
At national level, yes.
Yes, to which part of it?
Yes, nobody's doing the same type of work.
Okay. All right, that is interesting. Because I have well, hang on a second. I'd love to, do you have a link to a website or anything? I'd love to read more about this and really dig in and do some thinking on it. And then perhaps we can meet for some more specific questions.
That would be very helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
APTI, Association for Technology and Internet.
Got it.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Khadija. Thank you so much for your presentation and going over some of these tips with us. I have a question about just thinking about the pitch. So I do have the privilege of being in a having a home base, having a well-known organization from which I can do my work. But where I sometimes, I guess I wouldn't say that I'm struggling with it, but what I think about sometimes in terms of fundraising is whether or not I am making the ask or pitching for my own research. So I'm an anthropologist, researcher, or for my organization, or for me doing my research at my organization in particular, if that makes sense, right? So I work at the Data and Society Research Institute, which is, has been well funded and has been sort of good about getting funding. And I know in some cases people have been interested in me because they want to they're interested in kind of funding Data and Society. And so it's sort of like a conduit, potentially like I am like a conduit to sort of funding DNS. And so I guess I'm just like a little, and like I said, it's not I wouldn't raise it to the level of like a struggle, but I think about that sometimes in terms of strategy, even in, I don't know if Julia has told you, the science fellows are having a get together next week in New York, and part of it is we're doing lightning talks with the funders, and so I'm listening to this and I was like, okay, great. So how should I'm thinking of my lightning talk as kind of like a pitch, right? Whereas before this, I would have thought of it as just like, let me tell you about the content of my work, right? So in thinking through that, I'm like, all right, well, if this is going to be more, if I can frame this more like a pitch, is it a pitch about me? Is it a pitch about Data and Society? And I should also say that where we are doing these lightning talks, that foundation already funds Data and Society, like the organization, but not me in particular. So yeah, so sorry if that's a little convoluted.
No, it's a great question, and it is kind of a struggle. I mean, I think of all of you right now as fellows at Mozilla, and when you go out to meet with funders, what are you, I mean, there's a little bit of an expectation from the organization too that you're also representing Mozilla, and so where's that line? And it's not always completely clear. I think if I were you, the first thing I would do, well, let me ask you a question. Are you, does the organization, does Data and Society provide your salary? Is it money from foundations that are providing your salary via Data and Society?
Yeah, so that's how it's sort of mixed. So for my first, I started as a postdoc there, and my first year or so was funded by a grant from a foundation that went through Data and Society, and then I had maybe sort of like a 6 months gap, and then now I have the Mozilla Fellowship. So it's been kind of like that's going through Data and Society. So it's been kind of a mix of Data and Society covering my salary, and also, funds that I have raised myself, I guess.
Well, in that case, yeah, I hear you. So you're essentially raising money to pay yourself a lot of the time and to continue to do the work that you're doing. And Data and Society, I believe, is a nonprofit, correct?
Right, yep.
Right. So if you were on your own, Khadija, you would have to establish yourself as a 501c3 nonprofit, and that is a task and a half. And so I don't necessarily recommend it unless it's something that already exists, in your orbit outside of the Mozilla Fellowship, like the young woman I just spoke with about her organization. So I think that it's a question that I would personally want to talk to someone at Data and Society about. Like I'm going to do this talk, and when you're asking for money and if you want to continue to stay at Data and Society, then you should always couch yourself within that organization as an independent researcher, or however you want to portray yourself. But they are the parent organization that is helping to fund my work. Would you be willing to give to the organization to help me continue to fund my work? That's how I would word it. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yeah, that does. Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess
you're going to be
with the case of the Siegel Foundation. I'm not sure, but I think so. Like any nonprofit, Data and Society gets some project-specific grants, but they also get some general support grants. And so I actually don't know if the Siegel Foundation, where we're going to do our talks, gives Data and Society general support grants. I think they do. So, would my pitch be for like more general support to Data and Society so that I could continue to do my work there? Or, hey, maybe this is my idea for a project. Could you give me project-specific funds? Again, that would go through Data and Society, but like a project-specific grant instead.
And there are ways to find out exactly what kind of support Siegel is providing Data and Society. And we can certainly look at their 990 forms and find out sort of what are the names of the grants that they've given and what are they funding, and I can help you do that for sure. And we can also reach out to Laura, which I'm happy to do, who's the program officer that we work closely with, and I can ask her myself for you. But I want to also show you how to do it when I'm not around.
Great, thank you.
So no problem. And you are, Khadijah, you're going to be on our virtual roundtable talk tomorrow, correct?
Yes, that's
I love
right.
it. I love it. So this is my pet project. I am so thrilled to see this coming to fruition. For a long time, it has been, as a fundraiser, you're often the best way to raise money is either face to face and bringing a potential prospect into your space to see firsthand what you do. It's very hard to do that with Mozilla because we're so distributed across the world, and we're dealing with funders that are not based in one specific region. So this is really huge and important, and I'm so glad you're going to be part of it. And it's great practice. I know it's coming up quickly, and I'm not sure how much time you've had to prepare. But yeah, your pitch is going to any opportunity you have to talk to a funder is always a pitch, and I can't stress that enough, because if you get too heavily into the weeds and the content, you have 5 minutes. You'll never get through all the things that you want to say in 5 minutes. So tomorrow's lightning talk is good practice, I think, for you to really focus on what are the high points, what are the most important, impactful things they want to get across. What are those sort of, I like to open with questions like, did you know that? For me, when I worked at Pavona, the child sexual abuse agency, it was, did you know that 1 in 10 children are sexually abused by the time they're 18? And that most people don't know some of those facts. So you want to be drawing people in. Now, funders will have more of an idea of the work that you're doing than sort of your average general donor, but you still want to really capture their attention. You want to end tomorrow with people going, oh, I want to get back in touch with Khadijah. What she said sounded really cool, and it's aligned, with my work. So that's the mindset I want you to go in with tomorrow.
Great, thanks for that info. I will admit that I did not prepare as yet, and I think I didn't quite realize there was a kind of pitch involved, but I will do my best. So yes.
And the pitch is not, again, don't let me freak you out. It's not you going in there to, I don't want you up till 3 a.m. tonight. It's really just take your work and consolidate it and really try to focus on the most important points. And, feel free to take some of the resources from this deck. It can help you. It can ask you those key questions.
Okay.
Especially from slide 13.
Okay. And where are those slides going to be posted for us?
I am going to put them, is it okay to put them in your fellowship Slack channel?
Yeah, and actually maybe the Fellowship Summit one, is that like because the Mozilla Fellows one is like, there's a lot of stuff in there. So maybe the Fellows Winter Summit.
Hang on, I will do that. I will absolutely do that.
It might just be easier to find there.
It's called Fellows Winter Summit.
Yes.
I'm going to do it right now.
Is that right here? Fellows Winter.
Let me just make sure before you leave me. Hold on. Oh, here it is. I got it.
You got it? Okay.
I am now joined, and I will add the deck right now. And I'm going to tag you just in case.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, Khadijah, I look forward to hearing from you tomorrow. I know you're going to do a great job. And if you have any questions or you want to run something by me before tomorrow, I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You got it. Any other questions?
I have one brief question. I'm Sierra.
Sure.
I'm also a science fellow.
Hi, Sierra. Uh-huh.
Well, not really science. We're supposed to be Mozilla, but I'm one of the science crew. We'll be in New York.
Excellent. I'm so glad. I was just in touch with Laura about nudging some more funders to attend. So I'm gonna reach out and I think she's got a list of 6 or so that are planning on coming, but we've got a big long invite list. So I'm gonna work on that today.
Yeah, so I'm new to like the philanthropy world, and I've gotten most of my money from like government grants, NSF and NIH. And it seems that it's mostly a conversation that kind of builds with the more of the foundations and philanthropy. Sometimes we end the conversation with them saying, oh, this is similar to what we want, but we're funding something more along these other lines. And I'm not sure how much you want to bend your project to an organization / keep strong. And does that make you seem like wishy-washy on your project?
Oh God, that is an incredible question. And it's also, well, it's such a great question because even Mozilla has kind of suffered from let the money guide you syndrome,
Right.
you know? And we've had to really be strong about what our strategy is, and this is what we believe in, and we believe in it for a reason, because we know that it is valuable, it is necessary, it is the direction that's working and has worked. So now we finally, and this is just in the last couple of years, so don't feel like you're, that's why it's such a great question. We've really focused on the direction we're heading, and we're sticking to it. Whereas we will, in the past, when we were a little bit more of a fledgling organization, and in that cycle of a nonprofit where you're not quite sure, and you're getting funding, and you want to stay afloat, and so you want to do this and that, and you're okay to sort of compromise and change a little, and it falls under the strategic plan. In some ways, it's not as direct as and directly aligned as we'd hope. But we did it, and we would do these projects, and we learned from all of them, and that's okay to do that. I think it is. I do think, however, that if your core mission changes because someone offers you, a nice grant to go in this different direction, then you really got to sit down and think about it. And is this worth changing my mission over? Staying true to that is your lighthouse, and you don't want to veer so far away that you're not even really doing what you set out to do anymore. And it's a very easy kind of hole to fall into because you want to keep doing this work, it's tempting. And it's okay. Again, you're having conversations with these funders. They are learning from you as much as you are from them. And if their sole focus is in a direction that you think isn't the right direction, it's okay to also say that, and to say, well, here's to argue and defend your case, your case for support, AKA your concept note, is really going to make the argument for why your work is so important in exactly the way it is. Now, if you do a different activity or a different project within that structured sort of case for support to appease a funder, great, that's fine. I don't think that matters so much, as long as it is still pushing your ship in the same direction.
So have your kind of a core mission that's broad enough to move towards things, but when you speak to the specific funders, be specific on your action items.
That's it. And if a funder says, you know what, I really want you to do, convenings and try to get all the experts in this area together to do this, that's helpful towards your strategic goals, right? So that's okay. And if they like funding a specific kind of thing, there are funders that'll say, I don't want to fund workshops, or I do want to fund workshops, or I don't want, there are things that they just, for some reason or another in their strategic plan and the way the culture of the org is, that they don't want to fund, in that they don't find that is a way to move things forward for them. So really, being flexible around that stuff is fine. But if they want you to become a different organization, I went to see, as an example, when I founded a nonprofit, it was in Syracuse, New York, and it was around bringing free arts and enrichment to kids that lived in poor neighborhoods. And I went to talk to the United Way about funding, and they were like, you know what, I really want, I'm wondering if you'd consider opening a coffee house and having people, work there who maybe are coming out of prison, or it was like, that's not what I do. So, that, think of that as an example of what you don't want to do. I'm like, thanks, but no, you can't just pick me up and replace everything with a whole new mission. This isn't what my what I felt was strongly needed. So anyway, you get the picture.
But it's good to return with I thought a lot about what you said, and actually it's interesting that you want to go this way because blah blah blah. it fits.
Yeah. And again, don't forget, this is a conversation. It's a dialogue. It's not
Yeah.
like, it's so hard to get to that space because the power dynamics are so weird. You know, you've got somebody with all the money which is going to make anybody nervous and feel sort of like, please, you know.
Yeah,
like
I
the-
just
the
feel
beggar.
fake coming back and being like, oh, you said tools, by the way. Like, we
Yeah.
are going to build tools. And like, oh, why didn't you mention that before?
That's it. And you can say like, well, geez, we didn't think of that, or that
But, like-
wasn't part of our original plan, but I can see the need for it. And I'd be totally open to that if you really feel that way.
Yeah. Okay. That's good advice. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
I think that's probably the last question here.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And again, please pass along to your fellow fellows that we're here. I in particular am here to help with these kinds of nitty-gritty details. And feel free to Slack me and we'll book a time, and you know, I'm willing to put in the time to help all of you, especially in the same way that I did with Julia, because it's just, it's gratifying for me. It's not that difficult. I can write these things in my sleep, and, you know, I can also just give you a little bit of, you know, experience and advice just from my limited, you know, my limited resources. But seriously, I mean, we've got a great team here, Juan and Jesse Ward, and we're totally open to helping and want to be there.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Good luck with everything.
Bye.
Bye.